Two young people sat on opposite sides of a table, drinking tea in a hall decorated with luxurious gold trim. The man got straight to the point, blurting out that his companion could never replace Tatiana. This guy, named Wilhelm Haunt, was the protagonist's fiancé and was supposed to marry into her family. The engagement seemed to be going well, but that was not the case. The girl didn't quite understand what Wilhelm was trying to say. It would have been much easier to call off the engagement if the man had told his future bride these words before it happened. Wilhelm was sure he could give his fiancée anything she wanted, so he had no intention of breaking off the engagement, but it was important for him that she knew his heart belonged to someone else. The princess was stunned by the news, unable to believe he could be so despicable. Not only was Lord Wilhelm a jerk, considering he was supposed to be a knight in shining armor, but he proudly declared his desire to be Tatiana's lover. She was even more shocked to learn that Wilhelm wouldn't mind if his wife took a lover too, and that Tatiana knew nothing about this. It was just his one-sided wish. For Wilhelm, this was a particularly reckless move. In reality, this was all happening in the world of a game called Her Men, and the story unfolded in an academy within a fantasy universe. The goal of the game was to make choices and increase affection levels. It was a typical dating simulation game with multiple characters and different endings. But the problem was the character she had possessed, Karina Pioneer, was just a background character. The game description said she would be sexier and richer than Tatiana, but that was all nonsense. The custom settings made the protagonist as beautiful as a fairy and loved by all. Karina was just a foil to make Tatiana look even more perfect. This was tolerable before the end of the original game. Karina just went with the flow, although relationship problems remained a major nuisance. Daniel, the son of Duke Malfieri, was her first fiancé by arranged marriage. They were betrothed before birth. He was handsome, kind, and well-mannered, a popular choice for the protagonist. But when they grew up, Daniel didn't marry her. He chose Tatiana as his bride. Tatiana was Karina's friend and hoped this wouldn't affect their friendship. She chose the male lead, and the game ended. Karina thought she could finally stay out of it. But right after, Raymond, the master of the Magic Tower, began to pursue her. This handsome guy was another male lead candidate. Karina thought, if Tatiana chose Daniel, maybe I can be with this guy. But no, Raymond also chose her best friend. After that, she only got involved with supporting characters and soon fell in love with the eldest son of an unknown viscount. For so long, Karina had been unable to settle down in this world, and he was the only one who could make her happy. Day after day, week after week, month after month, another one of the princess's boyfriends ran off with Tatiana. In this world, even in noble status, outstanding looks and abilities couldn't compete with the protagonist's halo. Karina began to feel that her friend was deliberately seducing her men. But it turned out this guy came from a common family. Andrew Lovren Gloucester was the current emperor's half-brother and the only missing member of the royal family. Of course, the protagonist would end up with a member of the royal family. Shortly after the breakup, Karina heard news of Tatiana and Andrew's marriage. The game ended 3 years ago, and Tatiana got married. It seemed she would finally be forgotten, and everything would be fine. But Karina got into trouble once again. She walked straight up to Daniel and confidently poured a cup of tea on his head. She couldn't stand this bullshit anymore and swore to make him pay for every word he said. The next day, the kingdom held a grand celebration, attended by guests from all walks of life. Karina also attended the party, but after that terrible conversation with her fiancé, she couldn't enjoy it at all. It felt like being stabbed in the back again. Everyone was gossiping about her and the failed wedding, talking as if she were a woman obsessed with men. She didn't want to be here either, but her father was abroad, and the Pioneer family needed a representative, so she had to force herself to come. Suddenly, a clear, girlish voice called out from behind Karina. It was Tatiana calling her name. She said she heard from Lord Wilhelm that they were getting married and made a stupid joke about not stealing her friend's fiancé. High society loved to pry into others' lives, seeing Karina and the Grand Duke as complete opposites, like light and darkness. Unlike Karina, the man was an angel. Tatiana always pulled these kinds of tricks, acting innocent to make Karina look like a fool and turning her into a pathetic bridesmaid. Karina told her that Wilhelm didn't care about her marriage at all, and that it would be a great honor for him to be Tatiana's lover. Tatiana retorted that when she saw Wilhelm, they had joked that rumors might spread about them, and he said he didn't care about gossip at all. Karina listened, impressed, and so she suggested that since they were such good friends, maybe she should also find some time to meet her husband alone. The Grand Duchess of Gloucester reached out, trying to tell the girl she had completely misunderstood, but Karina violently shook off her hand, slapping it away. A servant came to summon the representative of the Pioneer family for an audience with the Emperor, which was perfect timing as the girl was about to lose her temper. The servant announced the Grand Duke Pioneer to the Emperor, then said that Princess Karina had arrived. She greeted His Majesty, and when she raised her head, she saw him for the first time. This was the iron-fisted monarch who had brutally slaughtered the rebels and their families, a tyrant devoid of humanity. The man looked much more harmless than she had imagined. Moreover, he was ridiculously handsome and was Tatiana's first love in the game, totally worth it. Karina was a loss for words. After the Emperor asked what she was thinking, she said she was struck by his stunning appearance. She wasn't afraid of him at all, even though everyone who heard the rumors about him trembled in fear. She had been through something similar, so she knew it was far better to get to know someone personally than to judge them based on rumors. If the rumors were true, then Karina was a lecherous woman obsessed with men. The Emperor thoroughly enjoyed talking with her and told her so to her face. They talked all night over tea, and the man loved the conversation. Before she left, he decided to confess to Karina, asking if the spot next to her was still available and if she would be his woman. Stunned by the sudden courtship, Karina replied that the Emperor could find a much better beauty than her. She had planned to go straight home after the audience, but he asked her not to slip away, as there would be an important announcement before the party ended. Karina returned to the celebration and was unfortunately spotted by Lord Wilhelm. He was talking to his fiancé as if nothing had happened. She reminded him that he was the one who ruined their relationship, so she had no need to explain her conversation with the Emperor to him, and was certainly under no obligation to stay with her fiancé. Karina publicly announced that she was demanding a divorce because he had confessed to wanting to sleep with the Grand Duchess of Gloucester, which caught everyone's attention. The man was furious that his fiancée was trying to humiliate him in public, so he raised his fist and tried to punch her with all his might. Karina squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the blow and already calculating how to pin everything on her fiancé and ruin the Haunt family. Suddenly, Andrew appeared out of nowhere and grabbed the attacker's hand. If Wilhelm had dared to lay a finger on Karina, she would have publicly shamed him, made him lose face, and destroyed his family's reputation. But Andrew just had to interfere. The girl thanked the Grand Duke and, without prolonging the conversation, quickly made her exit. She chugged her drink, fuming about what had happened and her pathetic fiancé. Karina couldn't figure out what she had ever done to Tatiana. She didn't care about Wilhelm at all, but the moment Karina so much as glanced at another man, Tatiana would pounce. The princess wondered, is there any man in this world who doesn't like Tatiana? Just then, she saw the Emperor's reflection in her glass. Their eyes met, and Karina blushed. He had told her to wait and not get drunk, but things clearly didn't go as planned. She thought the Emperor was finally going to make his announcement, but he didn't. If he hadn't lied to Karina, she would have left long ago. His Majesty asked the princess how he could make up for keeping her waiting. Karina was about to refuse, but noticed Tatiana glaring at them. She realized Tatiana was jealous because Karina was with her first love. So she asked the Emperor to hold her tight. He understood exactly what was happening, so he didn't refuse. Tatiana left, and Karina thanked the Emperor for his cooperation. She suddenly felt that maybe he was different from other men. She thought he was incredibly handsome, especially when he smiled. She told him that maybe they should try dating, but then immediately took it back. The Emperor would probably think she was crazy, asking him out after unintentionally rejecting him. But he was thrilled that the princess had changed her mind. If they started dating, he could eventually marry her, and then he would do his best to be the best man for her. Karina woke up in bed, recalling the previous night and thinking it was all just a dream. It was only when she saw the mountain of gifts sent by the Emperor that she finally realized it was all real. The Emperor also sent a letter inviting her to the palace and saying he hoped she hadn't changed her mind overnight. Karina was terrified. If she said she had changed her mind, the Emperor might get angry. Rumors would fly again, and this time it would be worse. Worst of all, Grand Duchess Tatiana would laugh her head off because she was the protagonist, not the princess. The sound of the servants presenting the Emperor's gifts pulled Karina from her thoughts. Florian fabric that even the Grand Duchess of Gloucester couldn't get, perfume only available to the royal family, and other things the princess ended up liking. Karina's personal maid, Lily, was the happiest of all. It was obvious that His Majesty was truly smitten with her. The door was suddenly thrown open, and there stood Duke Pioneer, her father. The guy was back much earlier than expected. He yelled at his daughter, telling her to get to his study at once. The items all bore the imperial seal, and the Duke was furious that Karina was accepting gifts from the Emperor while still engaged. She told her father she was divorcing Haunt, which made the Duke even more furious. He felt she wouldn't make such a move without a very good reason. Perhaps that Grand Duchess Tatiana was up to her tricks again, and he calmed down a bit. But it wasn't long before she dropped the bombshell that Lord Wilhelm wanted to hook up with the Grand Duchess, and he exploded again, slamming his fist on the table. He admitted he might be partly to blame and promised that Marquis Haunt would compensate her with gifts. So if she wanted anything as revenge, now was the time to ask. Karina asked for Wilhelm's Island. The place was a total dump right now, but using the salt there, the family could start a perfume factory. Before she was transmigrated, she loved this game and had seen all the endings, and Wilhelm's was her favorite. Without a doubt, he owned Sabin Island, an unwanted place where the sea salt could be used to create any scent you could imagine, as well as bath products. The protagonists launched a bath fragrance, and their main product was called Toddy's Aroma, and Wilhelm ended up gaining wealth and power. Of course, now that Tatiana had chosen someone else, his development had stalled. Haunt had growth potential, so now they needed to cut off all his opportunities from the start. Because establishing a successful business on confiscated land would be very troublesome for Wilhelm. The Pioneer family had money to burn, so her father easily allowed his daughter to do whatever she wanted, including not minding that the girl liked the Emperor. Karina showed Lily what her father had given her to make her happy. It was a blank check that could be filled in for any amount. Since the girl had no other friends, she invited her maid to go with her to a boutique to pick out clothes for her meeting with the Emperor. Lily was overjoyed at the offer and agreed to help Karina choose. Karina felt pressured by people's judgmental stares, and she was also afraid of running into her exes, so she hadn't gone anywhere for a while. But now she didn't care about others. Outside, a man blocked the girl's path. This man was Karina's second ex-boyfriend, Raymond Carcel. The girl told him to get out of the way and not interfere, but it turned out Raymond had also decided to come to this place. Karina didn't expect him to have a passion for women's luxury clothing boutiques. As a loyal fan of Tatiana, he was here to buy a gift for that girl, and sarcastically remarked that the clothes in this place weren't suitable for Karina. Lily chimed in, furious that this guy would talk to the princess that way, but Karina convinced her that he wasn't worth their time. The boutique manager, Fiancés, greeted the girls. Every high-end shop on the street had received a message from His Majesty, asking them to find something special for the princess. The Emperor had said to check Karina's past purchase history here and select gifts based on her preferences. Obviously, she was thrilled that he cared so much, but she also felt it was a bit over the top. She had only said those things while she was drunk, and yet he was taking such good care of her. Karina actually felt a little embarrassed. Lily excitedly buzzed around Karina, searching for the perfect outfit, and finally, she settled on one. Lily was gushing about how the Emperor was head over heels, but she froze mid-sentence. It wasn't just Lily. Everything stood still. Raymond appeared. He was the only one who would use time magic so directly. After dating Karina for only 6 months, Raymond had the audacity to think he knew her better than she knew herself. So she told him he was a pathetic loser chasing after a married woman and giving all the magic tower's money to Tatiana. Raymond went berserk, using his magic to freeze Karina in place and then ordering her to kneel and beg for mercy. Karina was furious. If he used any more magic, other mages would come looking, and she made sure he knew it. The guy pointed out that Karina had changed a lot, then vanished in a thin air. Time started flowing again, and after lunch, she went to try on some clothes. A carriage came from the Imperial Palace to pick Karina up. After getting out, she was surprised. This wasn't the Emperor's private palace, because he wanted to meet in a meaningful place. This was the Winter Palace, where Aster lived when he was a prince, completely private, so the only woman allowed in here was the Empress. The Emperor was being too good to Karina, and it was a disaster. She couldn't tell him she made a mistake while drunk. He greeted her outside, and Karina, completely caught off guard, leaned back against a pillar. The emperor held out his hand, and she took it. Aster was a bit flustered, as this was his first date ever. Aster didn't know what Karina liked, so he filled the table with desserts. She wasn't particularly fond of them, but decided to try a bit of everything. The emperor poured his favorite bitter tea, which was perfect for cutting the sweetness and reminded her of that time she was drinking. He knew Karina was worried about her family's reputation and such, but he hoped she hadn't changed her mind about them. In this world where the protagonist gets everything, Aster ended up being the biggest loser. Because the universally loved Tatiana got married, all imperial power was concentrated on him. Aster was the emperor, but had no real power. So to keep his title, he decided to suppress all the rebellious nobles. People thus began to call him the emperor on the bloody throne. He had a notorious reputation throughout the kingdom, and marrying the daughter of Grand Duke Pioneer would help maintain his image. Even though Karina had made a mistake while drunk, the emperor was still being kind to her. She didn't even know what she wanted. Aster said he really wanted to be with her. If Karina sided with him, Grand Duke Pioneer would become his ally, and he would also help her get revenge on Tatiana. So it was an excellent offer. The emperor knew what had happened between the friends. He thought Karina was too kind to still be friends with the Grand Duchess after all that. But that day, he saw the fire of revenge in her eyes. She didn't want to cause Aster any trouble, but he swore on his throne that he would always support her mentally and politically and hoped she would use his help. So Karina promised she would do everything to become his beloved. While chatting with Lily before bed, the princess noted that she and the emperor had a lot in common, and her maid fully approved of her choice. Just then, while Lily was cleaning the room, she found a bracelet that Karina had owned since she was 10. She looked at the thing and remembered her first real heartbreak. The main character of that drama was Daniel, who had abandoned her for Tatiana. They had been fiancés since childhood, and he had given them matching bracelets, calling them a symbol of friendship. Even back then, Karina felt that Daniel liked Tatiana. The original story was still continuing, and she hated it. The bracelet in her hand flashed strangely, but she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Lily thought the bracelet was cursed and told the princess to give it to her to be burned. Karina decided to keep it just in case and placed it on her bedside table. Marquis Haunt was furious with his son, crumpling a piece of paper and storming off to find him. Although Wilhelm tried to defend himself, his father knew the Grand Duchess was his first love. The guy tried to explain to the old man again that it was all a misunderstanding with his bride, which resulted in a loud smack as his father slapped Wilhelm so hard his ears rang. Making an enemy of the Pioneer family would bring huge trouble for the Haunts, so the old man ordered Wilhelm to go apologize to the girl and then threw him out. This guy and Tatiana had been in a strange, ambiguous state for years, more than friends, but not quite lovers. Of course, it was just a one-sided love, and if he had let it go, it would have all been over. So after Tatiana got married, Wilhelm tried to forget everything. His parents introduced him to a girl, and Wilhelm married her for the sake of his family and career. But the wedding took place, and they had never even met. Then after the engagement, Tatiana contacted him. They met again after so long, and she was still as beautiful as ever. Tatiana said that if Wilhelm got married, they could see each other more often, because since they were both married, no one would suspect anything. Wilhelm thought Tatiana wanted him as her backup, but then his relationship with Karina deteriorated. Regardless, the girl was ignoring Haunt. The guy decided he couldn't let this divorce happen. So Karina and Lily were researching various different scents. The princess was seriously considering starting her own business, no longer trusting men or marriage. She just wanted to focus on her career. She was grateful that the emperor was willing to support her, but she wasn't ready to rely on him completely. People started gossiping about Karina again, saying she was pursuing the emperor and even dating 2 men at once. That's what they thought. Lily told the princess to ignore them, that they were just jealous women. Every time, Karina pretended not to know anything and just laughed it off. After thinking for a moment, the princess walked straight up to those girls. She let them know she had heard every word they said and then told them the real story so they could spread the right rumors this time. The girls apologized and slipped away, extremely embarrassed. Karina suggested to her maid that they check out the Nivea store. It was becoming very popular and could actually be a solid base for the princess's business. Then Tatiana and Daniel approached her. The Grand Duchess hadn't expected to see her old friend in a place like this. There was a silence in the air, and Daniel flusteredly asked the princess to return his greeting. Karina told her maid to wait and not let anyone into the room. Lily ready to tray. So if Duke Malfieri or the Grand Duchess of Gloucester started pressuring her, the maid would be prepared. Tatiana asked her friend if the rumors about her getting with the Emperor were true, but Karina just laughed at her for even asking about Aster. The princess said Tatiana was just upset because she couldn't steal her man. The Grand Duchess tried to defend herself, saying she was just worried Karina had misunderstood her and Wilhelm. But the girl wasn't buying it. She figured that if a married woman showed up with another man, everyone would think she was a slut. Karina took note of Daniel Malfieri, because he and Tatiana had been friends since childhood, and even after she got married, this guy still followed her around like a puppy. He was the first one to betray the princess and leave a scar on her heart. The girl asked Tatiana not to interfere in her relationship with Aster and apologized for calling him by his first name, explaining that she called him that in private and was used to it, even though it wasn't true. Well, since it had come to this, Karina decided to speak her mind. She didn't consider these people her friends because they did nothing when those vicious rumors about her were spreading. Even though Karina was furious, Tatiana felt they were still friends and tried to mend the relationship. The word friend annoyed the princess. She forcefully pushed Tatiana's hand away, accidentally breaking her bracelet. The Grand Duchess completely panicked and began to frantically pick up the beads from the floor. Daniel promised to buy her a new one, but she was relentless. Tatiana only wanted the original one, saying, "This is too much." Tatiana ran out of the room in a huff, completely losing control of her emotions, with Daniel in hot pursuit. Lily entered with a tray, seething with anger. It turned out the maid had been eavesdropping and was about to smash the tray over their heads. This whole affair was nothing short of a disgrace. Karina was glad she hadn't ended up marrying Daniel. Just then, a strange sound caught her attention. She found a bead on the floor that had fallen from Tatiana's broken bracelet and picked it up. The moment Karina held it, an affinity meter popped up above Daniel's head. It showed 64% and was still rising, just like in the original game. Tatiana immediately rushed over and grabbed Karina's arm. Lily was still holding the tray, ready to serve, but Karina dismissed her and forbade anyone from entering. TT tried to snatch the bead from the princess's hand, but she simply moved her hand away, mocking her. Now, it was Karina's turn to take something from someone else. She didn't actually plan on taking anything, so she returned the bead in the end. Unlike TT, she didn't covet things that didn't belong to her. The Grand Duchess, worried that her friend had seen everything, spoke up to ask. The princess pretended not to know what TT was talking about, but then she laid her cards on the table. She was curious how this girl had used the bracelet to seduce her ex-fiancés. Every single one of her engagements had been broken because of TT, and for her, it was just a game. She had been so humble all this time, and now she dared to be jealous of Aster. But most importantly, the Grand Duchess also declared that the Emperor was special, and so were her feelings for him. At the doorway, Karina spotted Daniel. He looked like he was eavesdropping, which was the perfect opportunity to drive a wedge between them. The princess told TT that all her men would eventually get married, become someone else's husband, and forget her. But the girl didn't think so, retorting loudly that those men were all hers from the beginning, and she wouldn't let anyone take them. Daniel, of course, heard everything. He was heartbroken by his beloved's words and could only utter her name, unable to say anything else. A single tear slid down the man's cheek, and he rushed out of the room without waiting for TT. It seemed she would have to go home alone today. Karina assured the Grand Duchess that everyone would eventually see her for who she truly was. But even after losing today, she still insisted that she was special, unlike the princess. Karina told her to go ahead and wear her usual smile because her happiness wouldn't last long. The two rivals were about to clash at the festival. Karina was not only angry at Tatiana and the men who had betrayed her, but she also began to wonder if she was the problem. She imagined knocking TT unconscious because she had a bracelet of her own. The thing looked ordinary, and it was likely that Karina's bracelet had no magic at all. Perhaps the sole purpose of this game was to raise affinity, but despite all her efforts, she had failed to seduce Aster. She scribbled something on paper with a quill, thinking that TT would soon meet the same fate as her. Karina felt her attire was a bit tacky, but Lily comforted her, saying the outfit was perfect for teaching that detestable woman a lesson. There was no empress in this country, so the first slow dance of the opening was always performed by the Grand Ducal couple. So Tatiana would usually become the center of attention. Karina had always avoided such events because she didn't want to see her, but things were different now. The bracelet on her wrist looked a bit childish, but this was an opportunity to test if it had any magic. At the festival, Aster was bored to death by the high society people, his thoughts drifting to the princess as he waited for her to appear. Duke Melfiorian greeted the emperor, looking somewhat dejected. A man who wears his heart on his sleeve shouldn't be involved in politics, Aster thought. The emperor asked the duke about his relationship with Karina, and he said they had been best friends since childhood. But then, remembering she was dating the emperor, he clarified that they were just friends now. Watching Daniel cling to the Grand Duchess under the banner of just friends, Aster couldn't help but wonder what that word really meant to the guy. Daniel thought that Karina must be having a hard time, and he had completely failed to look after her. The emperor told him to be more careful in the future because he wasn't as easygoing as the princess. Suddenly, a clear, girlish voice rang out beside the men. It was Tatiana, of course, always popping up in a crowd of men. As she struck up a conversation with the emperor, Daniel noticed she had repaired her bracelet, and it looked fake as hell. What happened that day was still a mystery to the duke. Ever since that day, the sight of TD made him want to vomit every time she appeared. She told Aster it was her birthday very abruptly and then waited for him to react. He did respond, but also pointed out that her husband was clearly not giving her enough attention. Tatiana looked at the emperor with puppy dog eyes. Tatiana requested the first dance as her birthday gift. Before Aster could speak, Andrew Gloucester appeared, basically telling his wife to stop her nonsense. The Grand Duke apologized to the emperor for his wife's embarrassing behavior, but honestly, he had nothing to apologize for. Then Aster bluntly told TT not to drag him into her messy marriage. Karina heard some noise. It was Wilhelm desperately running towards her, trying to talk to her. But the butler stopped him. Duke Andrew had given orders to throw Lord Wilhelm out if he ever showed his face again. This guy clearly had anger management issues. He clenched his fists, ready to punch the butler. Karina, worried for the butler, and knowing they had to talk sooner or later, told the guy to back off. She decided to check the bracelet, and unsurprisingly, his affinity was plummeting. Karina thought they were done after the party, so she had no idea what kind of trick this guy was trying to pull now. Wilhelm's affinity score on the screen continued to drop. She reminded him of how he had lost control and almost resorted to violence. The Lord swallowed his anger, apologized, and admitted that he had messed up. Since he seemed genuinely remorseful, Karina accepted his apology but still told him to go away. He couldn't lose her, so Wilhelm grabbed her hand, begging her to stop the divorce. After all, this would be her fourth. Who would marry her after that? Karina wasn't buying any of it. She wouldn't let him see her out because she knew he was only doing this because Tatiana had found out about the divorce. She was fed up with him. Wilhelm saw a bracelet on Karina's wrist, identical to the one Tatiana wore. He thought she was imitating Tatiana, hoping his feelings would change. This guy was too much. The butler threatened to call the guards if he continued to insult the princess. Wilhelm's affinity began to climb again. It seemed he really believed Karina was imitating Tatiana for his sake. Karina had thought about wearing the bracelet to the party to check the emperor's affinity. That way she could say anything to raise his score. The princess's bracelet also had magic, but she decided not to wear it and had Lily put it back in her room. Walking into the grand hall, Karina sensed a strange atmosphere. Daniel looked dejected, while Tatiana and Andrew looked like they had just had a fight. As always, only the emperor was smiling, genuinely welcoming her. This is what it feels like when someone is genuinely happy for you. The princess asked Aster why he was so happy, and he leaned in to whisper a few words in her ear. The emperor welcomed everyone to the festival, saying he hoped they could forget about work and relax for the day. Karina couldn't stop thinking about Tatiana. Perhaps she was also from the real world, but if she knew the original story, she wouldn't be so obsessed with Aster, who wasn't actually that special. On second thought, Karina had always seen Tatiana as just the game's protagonist and had never really tried to understand her. Karina's train of thought was interrupted by the emperor. He invited her to join him for the opening dance. They made a perfect pair, almost melting into one. Aster asked what she was thinking about, and after hearing her reply, told her to focus on him. He was very jealous and just wanted her to enjoy their dance. Then, the two spun into each other's arms. Tatiana watched them from the sidelines, able to do nothing but bite her fingers nervously. The guests were gossiping about the princess again, but this time it was about how perfect she was with Andrew. For once, she was truly happy that people were talking about her. So happy, she was on the verge of tears. Grand Duke Final told his daughter he would be at the usual spot and to come by, but he was nowhere to be found. Hearing from the Emperor that Karina's mother, the master of the magic tower, was also at the party, she was terrified and rushed to find her before disaster could strike. She found her mother in the hall, grabbing Tatiana's hair and shouting that she had stolen her daughter's fiancés. Andrew tried to break up the fight, but he also faced the magician's wrath. The woman screamed that he was pathetic because his wife was always hanging around other men. When she saw Karina, her expression changed instantly. The angry glare turned into a joyful smile, and she let go of the Grand Duchess's hair. Karina grabbed her hand and pulled her away to prevent the situation from getting worse. Her mother told the princess that she would be staying at the palace with her father tonight. The Grand Duke had desperately tried to escape, but he would still have to face her when he got home. The Emperor walked over to greet the girls and say hello to the master of the magic tower. She immediately began to size him up. His face was decent, and his body wasn't bad either. Maybe this Emperor wasn't so bad after all. He knew her mother was worried about Karina, but he assured her that she had nothing to worry about. He was a good man, and he really liked the princess. The magician wished her daughter a good date and blew her a kiss. Karina was super embarrassed. Her mom was truly one of a kind. Aster found the girl's mother amusing. He thought the princess resembled the Grand Duke, but she was more like her mother. They were finally alone. The Emperor had been waiting all day for this moment. In the lounge, Tatiana was wailing as usual. Her husband stood beside her, while Daniel sat on a sofa opposite them. She was angry because her friend didn't help her when she asked the Emperor to dance with her. TT said he didn't care about her at all, nor about her pain. The Grand Duke asked Daniel to leave, and he left without hesitation, thinking to himself that Tatiana's behavior was simply insane. When it was just the two of them, she asked Andrew if he was angry with her, but he didn't care that she wanted to dance with someone else. It was then that TD noticed something was wrong with the bracelet. Lately, her view of the affinity meter had been blurry. The Grand Duke told his wife to remember two things. If she broke her promise, she would lose everything. And if she wanted to live, she needed to take responsibility for her words and actions. After Andrew finished speaking, he slipped out of the room without a sound. Tatiana was relieved that Karina had only seen the affinity window. If she had touched something else, the girl would have been finished. But even after the Grand Duchess reset the accessory, it wasn't working properly like before. Ray suddenly appeared before her, and she fell right into his arms. When he asked if someone had hurt her, Tatiana said no. But Raymond didn't believe her. Her eyes were as red as a rabbit's. In fact, something was indeed bothering the Grand Duchess. She asked him to do something for her, something related to Karina. Finally, the Emperor and the princess approached the doors of the Winter Garden. The inside was even more stunning than the outside. It was cool in the garden, and Aster draped his cloak over Karina's shoulders. The Empress was a winter magician, and her father had built this garden so she could enjoy beautiful flowers even in the cold. Karina thought the Emperor was such a romantic. Because Aster was born a summer magician, his energy was different from his mother's, and her energy was greatly weakened as a result. Then came the poisoning incident. The poison shouldn't have had any effect on her, but it was a huge blow in her weakened state. She passed away less than a year after giving birth to her son. Every time they met, his father would roar at the child, saying his mom had died because of him. Karina already knew what happened next. Due to his father's neglect, Aster's position as emperor became very fragile. So to consolidate his power, he had to kill all his brothers and anyone who stood in his way. The girl was furious at this injustice. A 1-year-old child couldn't have done something like that. The person who poisoned her was the culprit, so the emperor shouldn't have blamed the child. Aster was deeply moved that she was on his side. She took his hand and found it cool. The emperor said that people with cold hands have the warmest hearts. she suddenly realized how wonderful sincerity was, because good people can see it. Their faces were so close, it felt like it was the moment. But someone started shouting Karina's name loudly. It seemed to be Duke Malfurion desperately looking for her. Although the Emperor was jealous, he trusted her and let her go. Upon meeting Daniel, Karina asked why he was looking for her, since he usually only needed TT. The Emperor, feeling that this conversation was not for him, took a step back to give the old friend a chance to talk face to face. Daniel blurted out that Tatiana was acting weird. Karina, clearly frustrated that he had come to her just for this, retorted that she had always been weird. But their whole relationship was messed up, with the Duke chasing a married woman and calling her by her first name. They were supposed to be friends, but he always sided with Tatia. Now Daniel had seen the light. He apologized, admitting that he had been completely deluded before. This time, the princess was genuinely surprised and accepted her friend's apology. Daniel felt as if he had broken free from a spell. Ever since Karina's fallout with TT, he felt something breaking inside him. He used to think Tatiana was a fragile girl he had to protect at all costs. But after that day, she seemed so fake that even the thought of her made him sick. Karina absolutely did not expect Daniel to disparage Tatiana like this. He insisted that she was no longer the girl he knew. She had also recently yelled at him for not helping her persuade the Emperor to dance with her, and in front of her husband, the Grand Duke, no less. To dig deeper, Karina asked Daniel if the merchant who sold the bracelet was a magician. He couldn't remember clearly, so he suggested she ask her mother. Karina said her goodbyes, kindly reminding him that he'd be better off reconsidering his feelings for Tatia if he wanted to avoid a whole lot of trouble. After learning from the butler that her mother was in her own room instead of the living room, Karina headed that way, wondering if her parents still had feelings for each other. They had divorced after she and Daniel broke up, not only because their feelings had faded, but also because she chose magic while he chose family. They were both so focused on their own things that they forgot about each other, and Karina and Daniel's breakup was the last straw. The girl knocked on her mother's door, and a few minutes later, saw her mom standing there, out of breath. The princess asked her to tell her something about the bracelet, and her mom asked in return where she had gotten it. Karina was terrified, asking if the piece of jewelry had dangerous magic. But a single glance wasn't enough to tell, so her mom invited the princess into the room. Lady Final poured her daughter some tea and told her to wait a moment. It had been a long time since Karina had been in her mother's room. It used to always be locked, but nothing inside had changed, and it was clear her father had been taking care of it. Her mother guessed that Daniel had given her the bracelet, and she clutched it tightly in her hand. Bracelets are an excellent base for creating magic items, and this one was mixed with top-grade seasonal magic stones. Ordinary magic stones just store magic, but seasonal ones release it. They are extremely difficult to get a hold of, and very little is known about them. The person who made this bracelet was either a genius or a complete madman. Mom put the jewelry in a box so she could take it back to the tower to study it properly. A short while later, she asked her daughter how she and the Emperor had started dating. The girl didn't go into detail, just saying it was a long story that had unfolded unexpectedly. The woman pointed out that her daughter had always been a cautious girl and told her to follow her heart. For once, she could be a little indulgent. Turning the topic to men, Mom couldn't help but mention Wilhelm. Karina said she had already filed for divorce, and everything should be finalized soon. But the guy was acting weird, and they still hadn't responded to the divorce petition. A noisy sound caught the girl's attention, and her mom panicked, saying it was a cockroach she couldn't catch. By the table, Karina spotted some blue tentacles and swung her cup with all her might to smash the bug. It turned out her dad had been hiding under the table, and the blue tentacles were a few strands of his hair. As his daughter screamed, the man almost burst out laughing. He had been hiding well, but he couldn't help himself when he heard Wilhelm's name. Karina still didn't understand what he was doing in her mother's room. There was nothing to worry about now. Her parents had taken over the mess with Karina and her fiancé, and promised to take care of everything. The Marquis and Marchioness of Hantas did their best to welcome Karina's parents in the friendliest manner possible, not showing any emotion. The Final family had filed for divorce from the Horton family a long time ago, but were still waiting for a response. Wilhelm's father immediately claimed it was a misunderstanding, and his son Wilhelm himself had apologized to the princess. Wilhelm was called into the room to explain. He greeted the guests and prepared himself for the interrogation. His father tried to convince the finals that his son was genuinely sorry for his would-be bride. That day, the servants blocked his way, and the princess clearly didn't want to talk, so the guy lost control a bit. But that's true love, right? To act without hesitation for your love for Tatiana, to be with her. That's what Wilhelm thought. He said he had apologized, but the princess said she wanted a divorce. The guy admitted he had messed up and regretted it. As for wanting to be the Grand Duchess's lover, the guy claimed it was a misunderstanding and that he had never said such a thing. Lady Final was no ordinary lady with just the title of Master of the Magic Tower, so she went to their estate herself to find out the truth. Magic could recreate the memories of that day, and she would know who was telling the truth and who was not. Using teleportation, the woman instantly brought everyone to their palace. Then Karina asked Wilhelm if he was ready to swear on his title and his honor as a knight. Hannes's parents were very worried, but they consoled themselves that their son wouldn't lie. The guy agreed, and Lady Final began to delve into the memory. She warned everyone that they might feel a little dizzy. Everyone present saw everything that happened on the day the guy was supposed to apologize to his fiancé. Wilhelm's lies were completely exposed. The guy was in denial, saying he didn't remember anything. Karina's mother was furious because her magic would never lie, no matter what. The butler stepped forward to testify for the final family he served, because the servants had witnessed everything the onlookers saw with their own eyes. Wilhelm, who had sworn on his title and honor as a knight, must not have been too happy to be exposed like this. Now, no one had any doubt as to whose fault the breakup was. Thanks to Willie's actions, the girl received a large sum of Sabang coins, and now all she wanted was to find a good perfumer. Her mom sent Karina here, but this gloomy place didn't look at all like a perfume boutique. A woman greeted the princess at the door. She wasn't sure if the girl would find what she was looking for, but she was ready to show her some perfumes. Despite the limited selection, the girl picked a bottle and asked to sample that particular scent. It was a bit pungent at first, but a moment later, Karina found herself in a field covered in morning dew. The grass swayed gently at her feet, and a delicate floral scent enveloped her. After confirming that the woman named Nivea was the owner of this perfume shop, the girl proposed a partnership. But the woman's reaction was completely unexpected. She shouted that she would not work with this girl because the Grand Duchess must have sent her. Karina was angered by this claim. She brought up the well-known rumor that Tatiana had stolen 4 fiancés from a girl. Since the princess was that girl, it would be strange if she were still running errands for Tatiana. Nivea apologized for her hasty conclusion and decided that the Fry family might be trustworthy after all. But Karina was curious as to why the woman had reacted that way in the first place. Neva explained that the Grand Duchess had once come to her, proposing a partnership. She said she wanted to launch her own perfume brand and leave all the management to her partner. But in the contract, the woman found a suspicious clause. One part of it stated that all the formulas she created would immediately become the property of the Grand Duchess. Nivea had left her boutique to her daughter, who had also followed in her footsteps to become a perfumer. But when she brought up the issue of ownership and leadership succession, Tatiana suddenly flew into a rage. The Grand Duchess was furious at the woman's disobedience and even threatened to ruin her. Shortly after, Nivea lost her customers, and people on the street would no longer even speak to her. It was as if she had committed some crime. Nivea was exhausted, and no matter how hard the perfumer tried, everything was in vain. So she was planning to leave. Karina was all too familiar with this situation. She had never defied Tatiana, but countless vicious rumors surrounded the girl. Then Aster appeared in her life like a savior. This man believed every word she said and was the first to offer to help her get revenge. Now, it was Karina's turn to lend a hand. The princess decided to give the woman a chance and asked to help her. Together, they could rebuild the business and make it flourish. Nivea doubted the princess's abilities because Tatiana was the Grand Duchess and held considerable influence. Karina decided to prove to her that she wasn't afraid of Tatiana. She told her that she was dating the emperor and might soon become the empress, which would give her more influence than Tatiana. She didn't press Nivea for a decision, only saying that if the perfumer made up her mind, she could come to the Duke of Pioneer's residence. When Tatiana took everything from Karina and left her with nothing, she had wished someone would say such words to her. While having tea, the girl and her mom were bad-mouthing Tatiana. After everything she had done, she still had the nerve to act all high and mighty. Freya returned the bracelet to her daughter. Even at the magic tower, they couldn't figure out its origin. It was a perfect magic storage device. Lady Pioneer infused her magic into the accessory and told her to do as she had always taught her, so that Karina would always be safe. The woman said that Tatiana would surely find a way to harm her daughter, but she couldn't protect her forever, so the girl should be careful. Karina hugged her mom with all her might. A few days after her mom left, the princess was getting ready for a picnic with the emperor, dressed gorgeously, mature and elegant, yet incredibly cute. Lily was very happy that everything was going well for Karina. She had always been her support and pillar, staying with the girl through everything. After a knock on the princess's door, a servant announced that someone named Lella was looking for her, and it was urgent. Lella was Nivea's daughter. The girl said the shop had suddenly caught fire. Her mother had told her to inform the princess, and then went back in. But they still couldn't put out the fire. A perfume recipe book was left inside, and the woman went back to get it. The fire just wouldn't go out, and water was useless. If water couldn't extinguish the fire, then it wasn't an ordinary fire. It was likely a magical flame. In that case, they would need serious help. Karina sent Lily to the Magicians Association to have them send someone capable to the fire scene. As for herself, along with Lella, she immediately prepared to head to the burning boutique. Time was of the essence, so the princess jumped on a horse, telling the girl to follow in a carriage. Karina promised she would save Nivea and then galloped off. She rushed to the scene of the fire and froze on spot. The flames were still raging, and no one could control the blaze. Just as she had expected, the fire was magic-based, which meant only magic could extinguish it. It would take Lily a long time to bring a magician here, and in a little while, Nivea would be dead. Karina snatched a bucket of water from a servant and doused herself from head to toe. She announced that the fire was a magical flame, so everyone needed to wait for the magicians to arrive. And she, the daughter of the great magician Freya, would take responsibility for saving the shop owner. Her mother had once taught Karina magic, and one of the lessons was to shape magical power into any form you desire. Freya thought her daughter did quite well, considering she wasn't a magician. She did this so the princess could defend against magical attacks. Her mother's bracelet gave her strength and confidence. All she needed to do was to imagine the right shape. Karina created a water-based shield around herself. Now the flames couldn't harm her. Once it was done, she immediately ran to save Nivea. The woman was sitting on the floor amidst a sea of fire, tightly clutching a recipe book. Her leg was injured, and she couldn't walk, so she asked Karina to give the recipe book to Lella and tell her that her mother loved her very much. The room was filled with thick smoke, and the woman passed out. The princess couldn't just leave her behind. She had to get out of here with Nivea, leaving no one behind. Karina concentrated her power and created a stronger shield, a large dome filled with fresh air. After inhaling some oxygen, Nivea woke up and regained consciousness. Suddenly, Raymond appeared out of nowhere. He had probably been watching the tragedy unfold. Since Tatiana had no magic, Karina guessed this guy had set the fire himself. But Raymond claimed he was there to save the woman. The princess used the bracelet, hoping it would help somehow, but the accessory only showed the affection level. Raymond was no hero. The only person he did things for without expecting anything in return was TT. So he offered Karina a deal. She gives him the recipe book, and he gets them both out. Karina was infuriated by his words and told him she didn't need his help. Raymond grabbed the princess's hand, letting her know that magic wasn't an easy escape route for her. Another ability of the bracelet brought up a selection window, but she was so scared she didn't choose anything, so the system automatically selected Karina remains silent. The man's affection level went up by 1. He still insisted, waiting for her to hand over the book. The girl said she had no choice, and Raymond thought she had finally come to her senses and was willing to cooperate. But Karina just told her ex to go to hell. The barely conscious girl was still resisting. She just couldn't help it. Since the princess wouldn't give him the book, he decided to take it himself. Suddenly, someone appeared behind Raymond. Sensing the newcomer, the guy tensed up. Just as he turned to see the stranger, he was knocked out with a single blow. Karina barely opened her eyes, trying to see what had happened. It seemed the emperor had appeared to save her. The princess woke up in bed, her throat as dry as the Sahara. She asked Lily for a glass of water. It turned out her parents were already in the room, worried sick. Freya even held up her fingers for her to count. They were truly terrified and overjoyed at Karina's return. The whole family hugged tightly. Her mom scolded her for being so reckless reckless, adding that she had been asleep for 5 whole days. But Nivea had explained the situation to her, and her mom thanked Karina for saving her friend. She asked how Nivea was doing. It turned out she was fine and recovering in the hospital, having woken up even before Karina. The princess told them that she and the perfumer had seen Raymond at the fire, and he was likely the one behind it. But Freya quickly dismissed that. He had a record at the magic tower, and if he had cast a fire spell, they would have known immediately. Whoever did it was very careful. They blocked the magic, making it impossible to recover any memories. Her dad had also looked into it, and luckily Nivea had insurance, so rebuilding the shop shouldn't be a problem. Karina needed to focus on her recovery. There was a pile of letters on the table, all from the Emperor during the time she was unconscious. Aster had said he would send one every day until she wrote back. A few days passed, and Karina was almost back to normal, corresponding with the Emperor daily, even though he was busy with the defense budget. The girl was reading another letter when the butler came in to report that Lady Nivea had come to visit the residence. The woman thanked Karina for saving her life, but she had decided to refuse the offer of cooperation after all. She had inhaled too much smoke that day and lost her sense of smell. The hospital said her chances of recovery were slim, and she could no longer call herself a perfumer. Karina argued that Nivea shouldn't give up so easily after all she had been through, despite the difficulties. She had risked her life for that recipe book, and her years of experience hadn't disappeared. The girl urged the perfumer to fight until the very end. The woman was moved that the princess cared so much and agreed to her proposal, but on one condition. Nivea wanted Lela to be the head perfumer. Despite her young age, she was not just talented, but a genius. Karina agreed and began discussing the details. Her family was hosting their annual masquerade ball this summer. It was a tradition since the first Duke. The ball was already the hottest topic before it even began. So it was the perfect opportunity to showcase their brand, especially since the nobles were obsessed with personal care. The only problem was that the masquerade was only a week away, so the schedule would be tight. But Nivea wasn't scared at all. Karina had Lily prepare the carriage, even though she hadn't fully recovered. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, and that's exactly what she intended to do, declare war on the tiger. On the way, the princess reflected on how unfair this world was. It existed only for Tatiana, revolving completely around her. That's what she had thought until now. However, she had almost died recently. She and Nivea were not just puppets existing for Tatiana's sake. At the Grand Duke of Gloucester's residence, Karina was having tea, waiting for the Grand Duchess to appear. Tatiana hadn't expected her friend to visit. Of course, she had heard the terrible news and said she was worried about Karina. Karina told her that the shop owner had lost her sense of smell, which bothered her greatly. Titi didn't understand why the princess was telling her this. Despite the Grand Duchess's denials, she knew perfectly well who was behind the fire. So she had come to the Grand Ducal residence to remind her former friend that she had ruined someone's life. As Karina was about to leave, Tatiana screamed that it had nothing to do with her. She claimed it was all the princess's fault for trying to take what Titi couldn't have. "You bitch," the Grand Duchess snapped, pushing her friend. She accused Karina of being jealous and meddling in everything she wanted. Tati said that anything the princess touched was trash she couldn't be bothered with. The Grand Duchess started saying that Aster was no different from other men, and Karina slapped her hard across the face. Tati was stunned, but even more furious, swinging at the princess, but the girl easily caught her hand. Karina's earrings were enchanted magic items, and they had recorded every word her rival said. Tati said it was despicable, but in this situation, she was the last person who should be talking about playing dirty. The princess made it clear that the world would no longer be kind to her. Then she turned and left. Karina went to the servants and told them about the argument, humiliating Tati. Titi was about to lash out at the princess, but remembering the recording, she shut her mouth. The princess was determined to make her former friend pay for ruining her and Nivea's lives for so long. Outside, the Grand Duke stopped her. He probably wanted to talk, but Karina was in no mood to speak with her ex. Andrew grabbed her hand, and she immediately told him to let go. The Gloucesters were all the same, flirting even when married. The Grand Duke begged Karina for a few minutes of her time, but she told him to send a formal request to the ducal residence and hurried away. In the past, a single glance from him could bring me to tears, but time really does heal all wounds. The maid served the Grand Duchess tea, but Tatiana heard whispering and demanded to be left alone. She went to the door to figure out what was happening and found the servants gossiping about her. Tatiana had a bad habit of biting her nails and the skin around them whenever the Grand Duchess was nervous. At 19, things were completely different. Even back then, she used the bracelet to raise men's affection for her. Everyone admired TT's considerate nature and kindness, while they thought of Lady Karina as an ice queen. In the academy courtyard, Tatiana saw her friend with a man and went over to say hello. She and Daniel were going to cafe this weekend, and the future Grand Duchess invited the girl to join them. Karina said she had a date and declined. As soon as she left, other students started gossiping that she was dating a loser, so that he wouldn't dump her. And Tatiana, as always, played the role of a concerned friend. On the other side of the garden, Andrew was engrossed in a book when someone poked his cheek. He thought it was Karina, but was very surprised to see her friend standing there. The girl asked to see his book, and after guessing correctly, she ended up suggesting that Andrew become friends with her. Karina could finally relax and enjoy a spa treatment. Lily whipped up her homemade cream and gave a fantastic massage. The princess felt like she was in heaven and thought the girl should start her own massage business. Finally, the princess was ready. Thanks to Lily, she looked and felt amazing. His Majesty was already waiting for her in the residence's courtyard. Karina asked if Aster was tired or if she was bothering him, but the Emperor simply said that he loved his work very much. They were very happy to see each other, so they decided to take a walk. The Emperor asked when she had learned magic, and Karina, a little flustered, said her power wasn't strong. If it weren't for him, she and Nivea might have died. The guy insisted he only showed up after it was all over and that she might have mistaken someone else for Aster. She knew she was wrong, but at that moment, the eyes looked exactly like the Emperor's. In any case, the guy thought Karina was amazing even without magic, barely knowing any magic, yet she had dived headfirst into a blazing fire to save someone. She was worried that her reckless actions might have hurt someone, but Aster promised that he would always be on her side, in love and in politics, and told her not to doubt herself. Grand Duke Andrew was on his way to see the Emperor, not understanding why he had been summoned since nothing had happened. He let his guest in and offered him a seat. It seemed he wasn't going to be reprimanded after all. The guy decided to get straight to the point, saying he had to thank the Grand Duke. He had found out that Andrew had visited Vera Street a few weeks ago. The guy had some problems with his boutique. He needed to be there in person. The Emperor continued, saying that a fire had broken out in one of the boutiques that day. Andrew tensed up as he was sure no one had seen him there. The guy said Karina thought he had saved her, but the Emperor wasn't even there at the time. The Grand Duke admitted he just happened to be passing by and was able to help. The Emperor's expression changed, but he said it was all good, that Andrew deserved a reward, and handed him some precious seasonal gems. After the two said their goodbyes, the Grand Duke headed for the exit. He felt like a beast was burning a hole in his back with its gaze. Nevertheless, the Emperor decided to ask the guy one more question. He already knew that Gloucester's wife hated Karina with a passion and suspected they were behind it. Aster used magic to pressure Gloucester, who started making excuses, saying that Raymond, who had appeared in the capital, might be the culprit, but that only made things worse. Now knowing that Andrew had visited Raymond, the Emperor couldn't understand how he dared to claim he just happened to save Karina. Andrew always pretended to know nothing, and he always tried to take what belonged to Aster. Even as children, their father had doted on the Duke more than on Aster. The man was ready to give the boy everything, and even if Aster already had it, he would find something better for his younger son. Aster had to constantly tell himself that everything would be fine and that he would still become emperor. A few years later, the old emperor passed away and a brutal battle for the throne began. After getting rid of the main troublemaker, the second prince, Aster went straight for Andrew. The guy ran, which saved his life. If anyone tried to usurp the throne, Aster would immediately suspect his half-brother. He was just extremely lucky again because of his reputation. The emperor couldn't just kill a duke, so he pretended to believe his story. Walking out of Aster's office, the guy wiped off his nervous smile and completely panicked after returning to his residence. Gloucester anxiously asked his maid where his wife was. Of course, the woman could tell something was wrong. The couple acted as if they were ready to kill each other, and he had even drawn a dagger on their wedding night. Finally finding Tatiana, the Duke demanded she hand over the bracelet. He wanted to know where the magic he had infused into it on their first night had gone. The girl struggled to say that she had no idea if there was any magic in the bracelet at all. Andrew knew his wife was lying to him and angrily pushed her aside. The guy roared that she had no conscience left, that she had ruined his life. Tatiana didn't understand what she had done wrong, but apologized to her husband in tears. The Duke knew it was Raymond who had secretly used his magic and set the fire. He reminded the girl not to forget that their marriage was held together by her promise to make him emperor, so she should stop messing around. That night, the girl traveled to someone's house deep in the forest. Ray greeted her at the door. The guy was covered in bruises and scratches, but for TT, he would endure anything. He guessed the girl wanted to ask him for a favor, or else why would she come on such a dark night? When Tatia wanted to ask Raymond for something difficult, she always twirled a lock of hair around her finger. This time, Ray had suffered because of the girl, so she felt awkward asking him for anything more. But when the guy said he would do anything for her, TT asked him to kill Karina. In the commercial district of Workshop Street, the princess and Lily were already on their way to the perfumer's house. The mother and daughter were happy to see them. They apologized for the mess in the house and invited the girls in. Business was booming, but Nivea and Lella hadn't slept in 3 days, buried in their research. Lily, being the cleaning-loving maid she was, immediately started tidying up, while the princess asked the girls to show her the new perfume. Finally, everyone gathered around the table, and Lella began her presentation. The new perfume was created for the strong women of this world. The spicy top notes leave a strong impression. The middle notes are soft and captivating, and the base notes are subtle and long-lasting. The perfumer had far exceeded the princess's expectations, and now it was time for questions. She wondered if the noble ladies would like such a distinctive product. Lella replied that the perfume was long-lasting, with sharp and bright top notes that were familiar to the girls. But like the princess, it had its own unique charm. Lily thought the perfumer was an absolute genius, not only creating good perfumes, but also knowing the perfume seasons inside and out. Karina was stunned when she learned that Lella wanted to name the perfume after her, feeling unworthy of being the muse for such a fragrance. The perfumer made it clear to the girl that she knew how to wait for the right moment and didn't hesitate to act when necessary. She was brave and always ready to help. So the perfume conveyed the image of the lady who fought the flames and saved Nivea's life that day. The sun was already beginning to set below the horizon as the perfumers bid the girls farewell, wishing them a safe journey. Karina was glad she could help Nivea and Lella and stop Tatiana from ruining such a talent. In the past, she wouldn't have even thought of involving anyone in her revenge, but teamwork turned out to be surprisingly effective. For the first time, Karina was looking forward to the ball as much as Lily was. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor received good news. His approval rating among the residents had increased by 20% compared to last year. This was thanks to people-friendly policies, and the amicable relationship with the Pioneer family also had an impact. Upon learning that the Princess of Pioneer had arrived at the palace, the Emperor concluded the report and dismissed his advisors. When they met, he apologized for always inviting her to his boring workplace, but the girl actually liked it. It made her feel closer to Aster. Today, Karina had come to give the guy an invitation to her family's ball. She didn't want him to feel obligated, so she was prepared for a refusal if the Emperor was busy. Despite his heavy workload, Aster promised he would make time to come. After all, it concerned their relationship, and he couldn't refuse his girl. The dress Karina had prepared for the ball looked gorgeous, but she worried it might be too revealing. Her parents were stunned when they saw her. Like all parents, they worried it was too much, especially since Karina had said she didn't like such clothes. On her 10th birthday, Tatiana had dressed more splendidly than the birthday girl, and Karina had been very sad that day. Back then, she had kept a low profile so as not to interfere with the original story, but enough was enough. Tonight, she was going to shine. The ball began, and everyone was having a great time, enjoying the atmosphere and socializing. Suddenly, the lights went out, and the guests were terrified. In the spotlight, Princess Karina makes her entrance, welcoming everyone to her family's ball. Before the party officially begins, she decides to give everyone an unprecedented surprise and presents a perfume she personally concocted. Karina's parents watch from the side, their faces beaming with pride as they cheer her on. The ladies are completely captivated by the performance. Paper butterflies infused with an an incredible and unforgettable scent, dance gracefully through the hall. Karina is thrilled to see the guests enjoying themselves and the ball being a huge success. In her youth, she thought her role was to steal her friend's boyfriend, but it turns out she was the one holding herself back. For the first time in a long while, Daniel greets Lady Butterfly, giving her an incredibly gentle look and praising her with genuine sincerity. She wishes him a good evening and continues on her way. But he stops her, and Daniel asks Karina to dance. Considering everything that has happened recently, she is about to refuse. Just a few steps away, a champagne glass shatters. Tatiana has dropped her glass and, looking pitiful and wronged, questions how he could betray her like this. For hours before the ball, TT was restless, which was completely unlike her. She just wanted to get rid of Karina as soon as possible. The maid who brought her tea was terrified to discover the Grand Duchess's fingers were bitten raw and bloody. As she bandaged Tatia's fingers, she muttered, wondering if she should even attend the ball in such a state. But to the Grand Duchess, the letter was not just an invitation, but a warning. Karina was after her position. The woman named TT found that her husband wasn't ready yet, so she had to leave first. Her maid encouraged her, saying everything would be fine. Tatiana agreed, because no matter what anyone said, she knew she was special. When the Grand Duchess appeared at the ball, all eyes were once again drawn to her. This girl lived for the admiration, praise, and jealousy of others, all of which were like a balm to her soul. But tonight, the high society chatter wasn't just about her. Karina's perfume had also captured everyone's attention. Tatiana recognized that it was Lella from Nevea who had described the perfume to her and asked her to smell it. Just to get a feel for it, as TT was getting food from the buffet table, she felt a strange sense of unease. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of her faithful admirer, Daniel. Not only had his affection level dropped to 50%, but he had also snuck in behind her back. Tatiana decided to win the man back, but when she went after him, she saw a scene she desperately did not want to see. The girl burst into tears instantly, and Daniel's affection level began to rise. Just as she had planned, Karina joined them, finding it rather amusing that TT, the Grand Duchess, was flirting with a friend. She left the two friends to their own devices and turned to go back the way she came. This time, Daniel couldn't just stand by. He caught up with the princess and asked the three of them to talk things out. She didn't see what there was to talk about. The last time, she had made it clear that she didn't consider Tia and Daniel friends. It seemed they had completely lost their minds to have forgotten Karina's nickname from the academy. It was a nickname they gave her in the autumn of her 17th year. When Tati started dating Daniel, she acted as if she were the main character and chose Daniel as her leading man, thinking the era of the main lead was finally over. Because of the main lead halo effect, no matter what Tatiana did, people viewed her positively. But if Karina got angry with her, she would be seen as the villain. So one day, TT was hanging out with the guys, and Karina wasn't there. TT was telling them how Daniel had confessed to her, saying he had liked her more than Karina since they were children. The guys thought Karina was just an obstacle because TT was so sweet and charming. Karina felt insecure and jealous. That day, Karina overheard everything the guys said, including the nickname they gave her, the Jealous Princess. She couldn't understand why they would do this to her. TT was the main character, and she was just a supporting role, but even so, Karina still thought they were friends. While having lunch in the cafeteria, she overheard her classmates gossiping about her. Every word was like a knife to her heart. No matter how much of an outsider she felt, Karina wouldn't let herself be walked all over. So, she demanded that TT and Daniel put a stop to the rumors. TT feigned sympathy, saying she couldn't be blamed for the gossip. What broke Karina the most was Daniel. As a friend, he actually told her that there's no smoke without fire. So perhaps Her Highness the Princess should reflect on herself. Watching the contradictory performance of these two, Karina finally understood. Her family, looks, and abilities didn't matter because TT was the main character and she was just a supporting role they could slander at will. Karina called Daniel a coward who didn't want to be the bad guy but remained silent at crucial moments. If he wanted to keep pretending to be a friend, he should take a good look at himself. Tatiana played the victim, crying beautifully and accusing Karina of being heartless. All eyes turned back to the Grand Duchess. The guests murmured that Princess Pioneer had messed up this time, and their hearts broke seeing the girl cry like that. Just then, the Emperor appeared. He thought 2 against 1 was despicable and offered to stand by the princess's side. But it was no longer necessary, because the Grand Duke appeared by TT's side. He told his wife to stop acting and apologize immediately. The girl screamed that she wouldn't apologize and ran down the stairs. Seeing the Emperor and the princess chatting happily, Andrew felt a bit dejected and also turned to leave. Aster apologized to Karina for being late, whispered a few words in her ear, and then chuckled. Since it was a masquerade ball, she was supposed to keep his identity a secret, even though everyone already knew who he was. After a few more jokes, Aster invited the princess to enjoy the festivities with him, and she gladly accepted. This guy, who supposedly hated sweets, was indulging himself at the party. The more Karina watched him, the cuter she found him. Aster never understood why everyone loved masquerade balls, but after experiencing one himself, he began to understand. Wearing a mask, he felt calmer. Even if you know each other, you can pretend to be strangers and feel a sense of freedom without revealing your identity. He asked Karina if she also felt free. He had noticed that she was always deep in thought, worrying about something. The princess had been betrayed so many times that she no longer trusted herself. This must be why Karina felt so much pressure about everything. She was already drunk and asked to talk about something cheerful. Since the princess had invited the Emperor to such a grand party, he decided to return the favor by inviting her to the hunting festival at the Imperial Palace. She worried the event was too important and that perhaps she shouldn't attend. But Aster sensed her hesitation and said that if she could accept the game he caught, that would be enough. He told her to stop apologizing, because he had said he would always be on her side, so she could be selfish and use him as she pleased. Whether it was the alcohol or not, Karina's heart was pounding as if it would leap out of her chest. TT could no longer stand the atmosphere of the ball and leaned against the wall with her head down. Andrew approached her, wanted to go home with her, but she refused in fear. Her husband had a gentle voice and warm hands, but his eyes were as cold as ice. The man didn't press his wife further and headed for the exit alone. The girl felt terribly sad. Tatiana overheard more rumors about her and her husband's marriage and begged for someone to help her. TT's bracelet glinted in a peculiar way, as if offering its owner a glimmer of hope. The girl looked up and saw Daniel. Her friend offered to take her home. Outside, they walked toward the carriage. The man said it was his, and Tatiana could take it home. He added that he was her friend, so TT could always count on him. She thought to herself how kind this man was to her. TT reached out from behind to hug Daniel, but he pushed his friend away. The man admitted that Karina was right, and from now on, he would keep his distance from the girl. On the way home, Tatiana nervously bit her bandaged fingers. First Andrew, and now even Daniel was looking at her that way. The woman was convinced that Karina must be behind it, that this couldn't be happening naturally. She had to get rid of this rival as soon as possible. A madman stopped the carriage, practically throwing himself onto the wheels. The coachman slammed on the brakes, just missing the lunatic. The man rushed straight for the carriage, and the coachman tried to stop him, but to no avail. Wilhelm yanked open the door, and after confirming the Grand Duchess was inside, he climbed right in. She was utterly terrified. First, the sudden stop had jolted TT, and now a strange man was forcing his way in. Wilhelm's affection level was already maxed out. With tears in his eyes, he pleaded with her, asking why she was avoiding him. Tatiana cupped his cheeks and told him she was avoiding him for his own good. She said people suspected they were having an affair, but Wilhelm didn't care. He thought being lovers was no big deal in their time and didn't care what others thought, because he had already given up everything for her. Karina had taken all the documents and his inheritance. He was kicked out of the guard and almost thrown out of his house. The knight had given up everything to be with her. In desperation, he held her tightly, and TT promised not to leave him. The Grand Duke couldn't understand why Tatiana would ask him to place her lover in his personal guard. Of course, she only saw him as a friend, but others wouldn't see it that way. If Andrew accepted Wilhelm, he would look like a fool who gave his wife's lover a position. Tatiana knew her husband needed power, so she said Wilhelm was one of the best swordsmen in the Empire. and if Andrew were strong enough, he could stand up to the Emperor. After some thought, the Grand Duke agreed with TT. The man was prepared to accept her lover to take back what was rightfully his. After leaving her husband's office, she leaned against the wall and then collapsed to the floor. The stress after the bracelet incident had made her dizzy spells worse. But now was not the time. TT had to focus, or she would lose to Karina. The masquerade ball was coming to an end, and the excited guests thanked the princess for the celebration and asked when the perfume would be released. Judging by the product's good reception, she could go all out. Perhaps she could even upgrade the packaging and release a collector's edition. As the princess's #1 fan, Lily was incredibly proud of how she had thwarted her haters that night and was glad the Emperor had stood up for Karina at the crucial moment. After the girls said their goodnights, Karina noticed a bright light coming from the box where she kept her bracelet. The princess opened the box, and a dazzling light filled the room. A game notification popped up. One of the endings had been unlocked because Karina took Sapin C from Wilhelm and started her perfume business. A new notification said that achieving an ending would weaken the restricted status. The princess felt the space around her become freer. Of course, Karina had her suspicions, but seeing the word restricted with her own eyes was still strange. So, the reason the princess had felt Tatiana's influence strangely strengthen was because she had completed Andrew's ending, and the main lead's restriction had been weakened as a result. Karina was now certain that viewing an ending would weaken its influence. If she viewed it now, perhaps she could see the location of the famous Daniel Malfoy Hospital. She only sought out and funded doctors who researched new surgical methods. Karina just needed to open a hospital at that location. Achieving the ending with Raymond would be the most difficult. He was extremely hostile towards the princess. In the ending she knew, he gave up his position as master of the magic tower and swore allegiance to Tatiana. There was no way Raymond would swear allegiance to Karina, and he would be difficult to deal with. So she decided to think about it later. First, she needed to handle Daniel. The important conversation she needed to have with Daniel was about the land in the western part of his territory. Even though it was late, the princess intended to offer those lands as compensation for breaking off the engagement. Tatia's name came up again. He had recently sold those lands to her. Karina was stunned by her friend's foolishness. He had sold the lands without even asking why. She had also gotten Nivea TT before Karina, and now she was acquiring land. The girl was acting as if she knew the original ending, which couldn't be a coincidence. So, the princess asked Daniel to introduce her to his close friend who specialized in magic and medicine. Even if it wasn't in the same place, she would open a hospital with the same people. Maybe then she could truly change something. Daniel stalled again. Karina wouldn't be surprised if Tatiana had already snatched away his friend Robert as well. In fact, after Robert was disowned by his family, he and Daniel lost contact. That being the case, she told Daniel to find out where Robert was now. Daniel promised he would get on it and apologized again for what happened at the academy. Karina told him that if he was truly sorry, he should stop hiding behind a false mask. That was the only way he could earn her forgiveness. The girl sat at her desk, thinking. She thought it would be easy, but now she was getting nowhere. No land, no doctor. Just in case, she decided to try for Raymond's ending. The problem was, Karina wasn't sure how closely the ending needed to match the original. The keyword for Raymond's ending was loyalty to Tatiana. Perhaps any act that could prove his loyalty to Karina would count as fulfilling the condition. It was worth a try, but Raymond would not swear allegiance to her. Just then, she suddenly had an idea. A few days later, a knight from the Pioneer Estate told the princess in the middle of the night that Raymond had broken into her house. The guards had caught him and locked him in the food pantry. So she rushed to meet her uninvited guest. Everything was going more smoothly than she had imagined. In the pantry, the guy was tied to a chair with a gag in his mouth. Raymond couldn't say a word, which Karina was actually happy about. The guy was finally not so noisy. Unable to use his powerful magic, he could get a taste of what it's like to be an ordinary person. The girl removed her ex-lover's gag and told him she had dirt on Tatiana, so if he truly loved her, he should make a deal with Karina. Raymond had no intention of making a deal with someone like her, but the princess thought that someone like him should be kneeling at her feet. The difference between them was that Karina knew her place, and he didn't. Even Carcel's own family had rejected him, and he still hadn't become the master of the magic tower. On top of that, his terrible personality had made him countless enemies, but he never lacked for arrogance. Karina grabbed the guy by the collar, saying she knew he would sneak into her residence as soon as she sent that letter. She could see right through people like him. Raymond tried to tell the princess she was no better, but she just laughed. She was no longer the naive Karina from the academy who couldn't play dirty. Unlike the arson incident, she had solid proof of him breaking into her house. Raymond would be immediately disqualified from becoming the master of the magic tower. Then she would leak Tatiana's recording to the royal court. Arson and insulting the emperor. Best case scenario, hard labor. Worst case, losing his head. Raymond asked what she wanted, and she joked that she wanted his body, which infuriated him. Getting back to business, Karina stated her terms. The royal hunt was coming up, and he had to offer all his game to her as proof of his loyalty and love. Of course, the guy wasn't happy about it, but his options were limited. Either say goodbye to the position of Magic Tower Master, or just this once, swallow his pride. The princess sent someone to release Ray, giving him some time to think. Before that, since Karina didn't trust Raymond's verbal promise, she took out a contract. All he had to do was sign. The contents of the document enraged him. During the royal hunt, he had to give all his game to Karina, and until then, he had to obey her every command unconditionally. If he broke the contract, he would lose all his magic and his chance to become the master of the magic tower. In the end, Carcel had to compromise and sign the damn thing. The girl cast a spell on the contract. A mark appeared on the man's neck. His magic hadn't returned yet, and Raymond was furious at being unable to use it. He started yelling again, which angered Karina, and she kicked him out. Raymond swore that if he got killed by some street thugs, he would curse her for all eternity. Meanwhile, a shady figure was watching the mage from the bushes, standing on the street. Carcel already regretted not listening to TT. The guy had refused to summon someone to kill Karina, and she had flown into a rage. The Grand Duchess screamed that Ray was a liar because he had promised to do anything for her. In truth, the mage didn't want to go to prison. Besides, he didn't hate the princess enough to kill her. TT accused the guy of being just like all men and was about to leave. Raymond begged the Grand Duchess not to go and took a ring from a drawer. It was made of woodstone and imbued with mind control magic. If she used it correctly, all her disputes with Karina could be resolved, and the ring wouldn't leave any magical residue. So TT had nothing to worry about. Her expression changed instantly, and she threw herself into Raymond's arms. Karina felt sorry for the guy and finally opened the door. Judging by his guilty expression, he had been bad-mouthing her outside just now. The princess asked if Ray's magic had returned, and he proudly demonstrated his abilities. As an act of mercy to her slave, the girl assigned him a guard. Watching everything unfold, the stranger in the tree regretted missing such a perfect opportunity. Outside, Duke Daniel latched onto Karina, claiming the area was very dangerous and that he also wanted to see Robert Lone. Loan sharks were causing trouble near the doctor's house, the kind of people who looked like bad news. Daniel offered to deal with the guys. The princess didn't expect him to be so brave. He stammered like a fool, trying to explain, but the fat guy pinned him against the wall and told him to wait. Malforian apologized to the girl, saying he was powerless. Daniel was still the same as ever. Karina shouted to get the guy's attention and then whistled as loudly as she could. A knight landed right in front of the girl, ready to protect her. Imperial law forbids unregistered individuals from lending money or offering credit. As a city guardsman, he had every right to arrest them. Daniel had no idea what had just happened, so the girl explained that His Majesty had assigned her a bodyguard. Entering the house, the young people called for Robert, but he didn't appear. Karina found the man under a table. He was begging for his life, promising to pay back his debt. Recognizing the familiar faces, Robert finally got up from the floor and greeted his guests. The princess introduced herself and asked for a moment of the man's time. Robert recognized her as the girl whose engagement to Daniel had been broken, and he was happy they were back together. Karina corrected Robert, telling him he was mistaken. In fact, she was here to offer him the position of chief physician at her hospital. The man said they had come to the wrong place, as someone like him wasn't qualified to be a doctor. Although she didn't know the full story or the exact reason, she knew his research had been shelved 3 years ago. Karina pleaded with him to be a doctor at her hospital and continue his research. Robert was grateful for the honor, but recommended someone more suitable than himself, Erica Foreman and Allison Cameron, the doctors who had conducted the research with him. He couldn't say any more and asked the young people to leave. Of course, Karina couldn't remember all the details, but she was sure there were 3 doctors at the end of the game. Daniel told her that all 3 had studied and worked in Dr. Gregory's lab, but as far as he knew, they went their separate ways after the doctor died of an incurable disease. Foreman came from a poor family and dropped out due to financial problems after the lab closed. Allison, on the other hand, served as Tatiana's personal physician. Daniel hadn't meant to hide it from Karina. She had just never asked. Besides, her mood always soured at the mention of Tatiana. This guy always blamed the relationship between the princess and the Grand Duchess on coincidence. So the girl asked if it was also a coincidence that he dumped her and got together with Tatiana. Daniel wanted everyone to see him as a good person, but Karina ultimately saw him as a complete hypocrite. Anyway, the girl wasn't counting on her friend's help, but Raymond couldn't end up like he did in the game. She wanted Daniel to get the comeuppance he deserved in the original story. So she needed to bring the 3 of them together and appoint Robert as chief physician. But first, she had to figure out what happened between them. Daniel stopped Karina. He could help her in some ways, as he knew where Eric Foreman was. It turned out Mr. Foreman was working at a community lab, a job Tatiana had found for him at Miss Allison's request. Tatiana again. Karina guessed the Grand Duchess was connected to these 3 doctors, just as she was with Nivea. The 2 of them met Eric, and Karina introduced herself to him. She asked him why he had discontinued his research. He replied that due to his social status, money had always been important to him, and the research Foreman had done before was just to make ends meet. The girl explained that Robert had recommended him, but it turned out the 2 of them were no longer in touch. In any case, Karina was planning to open a hospital, so she invited him to join the team to continue his research. A 4-day work week, flexible hours, and paid leave. She promised to offer better conditions than his current job. Of course, he didn't have to make a decision right away. If Foreman had any questions, he could send a letter to the Pioneer family's estate. Finally, the doctor asked Karina to pass on a message to Robert, should they ever meet again. Tell him that they had no other choice at the time. Afterwards, the butler handed a letter to the girl. The letter was from that very doctor. Attached to it were documents from the association, which could reveal what had truly happened between those 3 people. Just as Karina had expected, it had all happened in the same month 3 years ago. After Professor Allison passed away, she became Tatiana's attending physician. At the same time, the girl contacted Nivea. If the princess were to arrange a meeting with Allison, only one date would be suitable. Just then, Lily burst into the room, out of breath, in a hurry to report something. The girl blurted out that something terrible had happened. She was panting so hard, she couldn't even form a complete sentence. So the butler went to get her some water. Finally, after catching her breath, Lily revealed the truth. A new perfume boutique had opened right across the street from their soon-to-be-open shop. And guess what? The boutique belonged to the family of Marquis Hunt, not Duke Gloucester. It seems Tatiana didn't want to get her own hands dirty, so she used the Marquis to carry out this scheme. Rumor has it that Lord Wilhelm has been appointed as the commander of the Silver Dragon Knights, and that order is affiliated with the Duke Gloucester family. Lily was, of course, furious that someone like him had become the commander of a knight order. Karina sensed that Tatiana had placed a cornered Wilhelm into the order, and in exchange, she had him open the boutique. Lily also understood perfectly well that this was no coincidence, which made her even more furious. However, this was to be expected, and having a competitor nearby was just part of doing business. Karina wasn't bothered by it all. She saw every crisis as an opportunity to take her boutique to the next level. After hearing this, the princess gathered the girls to calm everyone down before discussing their next move. After their new perfume was launched at the masquerade ball last week, they now faced a tricky new problem. A competitor had popped up right across the street. Since that despicable perfume shop opened 2 days ahead of them, they had to completely crush this unethical competitor, fueled by a fire of rage. The girls all agreed with Karina's plan. With no objections, there was only one item on today's agenda. They were going to postpone the boutique's opening date. At these words, Lily, Nivea, and Lella were left frozen, their jaws practically on the floor. You might think that with a competitor in the picture, They would be eager to open, especially since the masquerade ball had already made their perfume famous. Karina passed around a list of clients who were ready to, by the moment they smelled the perfume at the ball. First, they would sell a batch of perfume to all 100 bigwigs on the list. As the ladies saw at the ball, in the small pond of high society, gossip spreads like wildfire. Rumors about their perfume would spread quickly, and when everyone was talking and interest was at its peak, they would open the boutique right after the royal hunt. Nivea and Lella's shop would become the most exclusive perfume boutique in the empire. So they weren't going to panic and rush to open. On the contrary, they would wait, build up their strength, and let the brand grow. For this, Karina had a two-point plan. The first floor would offer a mass-market perfume line for regular customers, while the second and third floors would be for high-end products. Nivea decided to bring up an idea that had been shelved due to funding issues. The idea was to use the scent of their perfumes to create a basic skincare line, like bath products or body lotions, that would complement their core fragrances. This way, even people who didn't use perfume often could enjoy those captivating scents. More importantly, when the perfume was layered with these skincare products, the fragrance would be even more pronounced. By mixing skincare and perfume, everyone could create their own unique scent. One of a kind. But there was one huge problem. To make the scent of the skincare products last, it would require the intervention of alchemy. It was said that 3 years ago, the Carcel family obtained a patent in this field. So we'd need their help to make it happen. Coincidentally, 3 years ago, after the Grand Duchess left and the funding dried up, all the alchemists, including the Carcel family, cut ties with Nivea. She still held a grudge about it. Karina told her not to worry and promised to find an alchemist for her. Just then, Nivea suggested Raymond Carcel. The princess didn't react for a moment. Her intuition told her that Grand Duchess Tatiana was in cahoots with the Carcel family alchemists registered with the association. They acted as if any contact with her would bring them ruin, but Raymond was different. True, he wasn't a member of the association, but he was still a Carcel and an alchemist in his own right, so he might be able to find a loophole. Okay, yes, he was the one who caused Nivea to lose her formula and her sense of smell. But she wasn't going to let a moment of emotion get in the way of her work. Right now, their top priority was to launch this business and make it a success. Karina noted that Nivea had changed a lot since they first met, as if she had finally broken free and spread her wings. She told Nivea that she was a truly strong person. Now Nivea was completely certain that she would believe in her own and her daughter's strength and continue to move forward. Just as Karina thought, choosing Nivea as a partner was the best decision she could have made. All right, it was time to contact Raymond and make use of their contract. But even if the princess agreed to work with him, she was against Nivea meeting the man herself. Karina wanted Nivea to accept her acting as the middleman. Even if they were strategic allies now, she would definitely get her revenge on him later. The girl paid a visit to Raymond, telling him there was a job she needed his help with. The mage laughed, saying that even if they had a contract, he wasn't her servant. Besides, his magic had returned, and she should leave with her guard. Karina said he was just afraid she'd make him do something weird, which the guy immediately denied. The girl handed him a few pages outlining everything he needed to do. The princess promised to cover all the research costs. Raymond was surprised by the request, as she could have gone to someone else in his family. He was a mage aspiring to be the master of the magic tower, so he wasn't keen on dabbling in alchemy. He was an alchemy prodigy as a child, but Karina couldn't care less how much he hated it now or what he thought of his family. They had a contract, and he couldn't defy her. Raymond rubbed the mark on his neck, threatening that once the contract expired, she would find out what was waiting for her. Karina had already drawn up the contract, and all he had to do was sign. All the research materials were ready, and all he had to do was conduct the research as per the documents. Raymond signed the contract, though he found the girl's actions arrogant. On Karina's orders, the guard would stay with the mage for the time being, as he needed to be closely monitored. He might be plotting something before the contract even ends, or he might steal the secret formula. Who knew what was going on in that guy's head? Having a stranger in the house made Raymond flustered, but the guard made himself comfortable in Raymond's armchair, looking perfectly at ease. The experiment was scheduled to begin next week. There was nothing more to discuss. With that, Karina headed for the door. As she was organizing documents back in her room, Lily brought her some tea. The princess had been working day and night recently, barely resting since the boutique preparations began. Now that the partnership was settled today, Lily suggested she get some proper rest, but Karina was still thinking about the boutiques. third floor layout, even before the royal hunt had started. She needed to oversee the construction, double-check client addresses, and monitor perfume development and packaging design. Besides, Raymond had many enemies. According to the guard, half the kingdom wanted him dead. Karina didn't particularly care if he lived or died, but their formula was at risk of being leaked, so she needed to investigate the people lurking around him. The princess had a point, but she worked so hard and was always busy, which worried Lily. So she insisted that she relax, take a bath, and even offered to give her a massage. Karina jumped up in excitement, as that was exactly what she needed. They could open a spa on the third floor, offering massages using their brand's products. Lily cried out in despair because she told her to relax, and she was still thinking about work. It seemed being an entrepreneur was in Karina's blood. Later that day, the emperor was having tea in one of his palace halls. Strangely, he wanted to see Mrs. Pioneer, not her daughter. The lady had hinted that she didn't have much time left. Aster had heard that Lord Raymond had recently entered the duchy illegally, and he didn't understand why she was so lenient with him. Karina's mother frowned, not understanding what he was implying. She had sacrificed her own hair for her daughter without a second thought. Yet Raymond seemed to be getting away with everything. The emperor knew Raymond hated the princess and thought Mrs. Pioneer knew it too, so she must have set a trap for him to suppress his magic. The lady asked if he was suggesting that this was why she let Raymond threaten her daughter. Aster wanted to say no, but he was also worried about his own daughter. Mrs. Pioneer had thought His Majesty was seeing her daughter for political reasons, so she was surprised he had a human side to him. The biggest regret of her life was introducing her daughter to Raymond, as she had once thought they were a perfect match. They didn't act mature for their age like other children, as if they were hiding something. But they were completely similar in their own weird way, unable to fit in. The lady was terribly mistaken. Not only was she a bad mother, but she also left her only daughter with a lifelong trauma. So, the emperor didn't understand why she still kept Raymond in the running to control the magic tower, since she could have cut down the candidates, right? Mrs. Pioneer said it didn't matter, because Raymond would never be able to control the magic tower anyway. About 10 years ago, she and Raymond met at the old Carcel laboratory. She was there to pick up an order the lab was making and happened to run into the child. Raymond looked too young to be an employee, so she was curious who he was. One of the men told her he was a Carcel kid, saying he was a bona fide genius when it came to alchemy, so they just left him there. The child was rail-thin and looked covered in scars and needle marks. Unfortunately, Mrs. Pioneer couldn't speak to him then. The lab's rules stated that only employees could talk to other employees, so she used her magic to send a flower petal from the second floor down into the child's hands below. The lady thanked the employee for the order and left in a hurry. Raymond didn't realize what had just happened at the time. That night, on the third floor of the research center, the boy lay on a bed in one of the subject rooms, staring at the petal. The thing began to glow, then filled the entire room with a bright pink light. In that moment, Freya Pioneer appeared before Raymond, the very woman who had visited their lab during the day. She explained that she was just a passing mage and asked for the young alchemy prodigy's name. The boy introduced himself as Carcel 3627. It sounded more like a street address than a name. Anyway, after their meeting, Freya decided to look into some of the lab's records. It turned out they were conducting a secret but very interesting experiment called the Mage Project. Children with almost no magic were injected with illegally synthesized, alchemically created mana, which then began to self-regenerate within their bodies, thus creating artificial mages. The experiment resulted in the deaths of all 11 test subjects, except for the boy. Although he was the sole survivor, he was only considered a half success. No matter how many potions they pumped into Carcel, he still had almost no magic. The child was about 11 or 12, around the same age as Freya's daughter. She couldn't believe how thin the child was, and handed him a bread roll, hoping he would at least eat something. The boy practically devoured the food, and it seemed they weren't feeding him at all here. Freya didn't know how to break the news she was about to deliver. Most likely, Carcel would die before he even hit puberty. The alchemists might have been fools for toying with him, but to a gifted mage like her, it was obvious. The problem wasn't his lack of magic. She directed the boy's energy flow towards herself to gauge its total volume. The problem was that he was overflowing with mana, far more than he could ever control. If he kept that much magic inside him, Eventually, he would explode and die, just like his little friends. Tears streamed down the child's face, but Freya hadn't meant to scare him so badly. She promised to tell him how to survive, but in exchange, Karcel could not tell anyone that she had helped him. He had to keep this secret for his entire life. From that day on, she taught him every night how to control his mana so that he could escape the lab. After escaping, the child had to go to the Mages Association and show them a letter of recommendation. Once he became a member, it would be difficult for the alchemists to harm him. But on the other hand, he would become an enemy of the Karcel family and live the life of a wanderer. Karcel 3627 was even ready to give up his last name, but she told him to keep it. If he ever gained any power in the future, that name would come in handy when the truth came out. He couldn't use a name made of numbers on official documents, so Freya racked her brain, trying to think of what to call the child. After considering different options, they finally settled on Karcel Raymond. And so, Raymond became a member of the Mages Association and even a candidate for the next master of the Magic Tower. In truth, the Karcel family's experiment was only a half success. The first law of alchemy is that to obtain something of equal value must be given. Raymond started as a normal kid with no magic, but now he possessed immense power and was a candidate for the Magic Tower, all thanks to alchemically created mana. He would eventually have to pay the price. Karina, along with her retinue, came to deliver research materials to the guy. Blood was trickling from the corner of Raymond's mouth. Thanks to Freya teaching him magic, he was lucky to have survived into adulthood, but the price was coming due soon. A guard greeted the princess at the door. After hearing a cough, she learned that Raymond was inside, but he was in bad shape, so maybe they should call a doctor. Just then, the guy collapsed onto the floor, scaring everyone. Karina sat at the head of the bed where they had placed the mage. She reached out her hand to Raymond, and he immediately grabbed it, apparently mistaking her for Tatiana in his sleep. He mumbled that he would try harder and begged her not to leave him. The girl asked the guard if anything had happened before she arrived, but there was nothing. Raymond had been fine this morning, at least, and then he suddenly started coughing up blood. Besides that, the guy wanted to talk about something else. Those assassins he mentioned last time, according to him, were mostly sent by the Karcel family, the very family Raymond belonged to. Karina wondered what one had to do for their own family to try and kill them. But back to reality. The mage declared it was none of her business. Raymond didn't understand why he had fainted, as he'd never had health problems. So he continued to pretend he was very strong, blaming the fainting on just being a little tired. In that case, Karina asked if he wanted to let go of her hand. He immediately snatched his hand back. It seemed he was back to normal, so she prepared to leave. The doctor should be arriving soon, and she told Raymond to focus on recovering until he was fully healed. She had come to give him some alchemy stuff, so she left everything on the table for him to start working on once he recovered. But for today, he could just rest and get better. Raymond was surprised he was being allowed to rest, though of course, he couldn't work properly in his condition anyway. Karina handed him a small bottle of aromatherapy oil to help with fatigue. It was handmade by Lily, and she was almost reluctant to give it away. Still, it would be a tragedy if this guy died before finishing his work. As the girl headed for the exit, Raymond made some noise that sounded like a thank you, but of course that was too hard for him. So the guy just told her not to expect any thanks. Karina told him to take the oil as a gift, start the research, and finish it on time. Since Raymond considered himself a genius wizard, he promised to make a better skincare product than she deserved. As the girl finally left, a blush crept up his face. The guy couldn't believe he had shown himself in such a pathetic state in front of the princess. Back in her room, Tatiana was examining the ring Raymond had given her. The ring looked like it was made for a man, as it was too big. That time Ray told her he would help, but then he just disappeared. So she was sure he only gave her the ring to get rid of her. And that was it. Tatiana's head began to throb with pain again. Lately, whenever she thought about something serious, a migraine would hit her instantly. Of all times, Andrew walked into the room. The girl suddenly tossed the magic ring back into her pile of jewelry. Her husband was getting ready to go to the palace. The royal hunt season was about to begin. Karina had to attend as well, as it was an official event. Moreover, it was the first hunt since Emperor Aster ascended the throne. It would look strange if she was dating the emperor, but missed an event like this. So Tatiana offered to go as well. Andrew asked his wife to confess what she was planning. She reminded him that she had promised to make him emperor. She told him to trust her and promised to take back everything he had lost. Raymond was reading Karina's letter, which told him to fulfill his promise at the royal hunt. He glanced at the small bottle of essential oil and then apologized to someone in his mind, as he had already made up his mind. In a guest room at the ducal estate, Tatiana and Wilhelm were talking about how the boutique was doing. The guy had done exactly as she said, so customers were lining up, and the perfume named after her was almost sold out in just one day. That heir from the Carcel family, Ethan, also helped by spreading the word that Tatiana always used this perfume, which made everyone want to buy it. At this rate, everyone would forget about Karina's perfume, the one everyone was talking about, but no one could buy. Wilhelm, like a happy puppy, kept saying his girl was not only stunningly beautiful, but also talented, and that the word perfect was invented for her. She had heard from some female friends that pre-orders for Karina's limited edition perfume were open, so Tatiana wondered if there was any news about the perfume shop's opening. Wilhelm had learned from the association that Karina planned to postpone the opening, so he thought she was scared and had run away with her tail between her legs. Tatiana, on the other hand, thought her former friend was brewing another vicious plot. Her boyfriend supported her, saying that unlike her, who was honest and sincere, there was always something rotten and vile about the princess. Tatiana got up to leave, but Wilhelm stopped her, suggesting they go see their shop. He was clearly overestimating himself, and she told him that she and Andy had plans for the day. This time, the Grand Duke appeared at just the right moment. He wanted to know why the knight wasn't at training. Tatiana placed her hand on the guy's shoulder, who was already sweating from the pressure. She told him they were handling some shop matters, but he could go now. After Wilhelm stormed out, slamming the door, Andrew commented that he looked at his wife like a loyal puppy, as if she were his master and not the other way around. The Grand Duke headed outside before dark, and Tatiana grabbed his arm to stop him. The guy violently shook his arm off, accidentally knocking the girl to the ground. He told her not to touch him again, and Tatiana apologized. It was fine. She would have other chances. On Vera's Commercial Street in the 3rd District, the Grand Duke and Grand Duchess strolled along, accompanied by the pleasant chatter of passersby. At one point, the girl overheard someone say it was all for show, as there were rumors their relationship wasn't so amicable. She looked around, but there was no one nearby. To Tatiana's surprise, her husband took her hand and suggested they walk a little longer. He believed that the more people saw them together, the better their reputation would be, so attracting more attention like this was actually beneficial for them. People reacted quickly. 2 girls immediately rushed over to them. They had last seen the Duke at the masquerade ball and wondered what brought him here. Tatiana explained that her husband was usually busy with official duties at the palace, so they finally had some time today and decided to go out on a date. The girls squealed with delight, but then lamented that the center of the street was blocked off on such a beautiful day. It was said that a certain nobleman had paid a fortune to all the boutiques in the 1st District to reserve that section of the street for the entire day. They said he had arranged it all for his beloved. Such deep love. Next, the girls decided to ask when the couple planned on having children. They thought it would be wonderful if such a handsome couple had a son. The emperor wasn't married yet, and if they had an heir, he would become the crown prince. Tatiana wrapped her arms around her husband's shoulders and told the girls that for now, they just wanted to enjoy their time as a couple. Andrew let out a small laugh, as if embarrassed by the public display. But this was too much. A child was useless. He was planning to take the emperor's place himself as soon as Aster was dead. Then he would get a divorce and go back to Karina. And she was walking towards them right now. Tatiana saw that she was clearly unhappy, and Andrew was also flustered, not understanding why the princess was here. It was laughable to be family with the emperor, yet they had no idea she was supposed to meet his majesty in the 1st District. Today, Tatia finally lost her composure and screamed that it was a lie. After that outburst, the girl finally realized she had messed up. She couldn't let Karina have the man she couldn't get. Someone like her didn't deserve the emperor at all. Andrew found it out, saying that the Duchess and the princess were old friends. Besides, Tatiana was now a member of the royal family too, and for the Duchess not to know she was meeting His Majesty must have been very upsetting. Tita confirmed that she was very happy for her best friend to be on a date with the emperor, but for a moment, she thought it was a lie and got a little upset, so the words just slipped out. Watching this scene, Karina almost laughed out loud. She was under no obligation to explain her love life to anyone, and besides, she was already late, so she had to go. She took a few steps, but Tatiana stopped her and asked to go with her. She said she was practically family with the emperor, but he had been so busy lately that they hadn't had a chance to catch up. She just wanted to say hello. Although Karina felt pressured, she just told her to do as she pleased. As they walked down the street together, Tatiana was sizing up the princess. She was certainly eye-catching, but still a bit plain and cold. Tatiana couldn't understand why the emperor was still seeing such an unremarkable woman, because honestly, she was much better than her. Andrew, who knew his wife's little mannerisms, could already tell she was plotting some malicious scheme. Finally, the three of them reached the emperor, and Karina reached out to touch his hand in greeting. Needless to say, he was far less thrilled to see the other two. They also bowed to greet his majesty. Aster decided not to disturb the couple's date and made his excuses, but Tatiana stopped him. The girl fiddled with her beads and began to say that she and the princess had grown up together at the academy since they were children and were best friends who told each other everything. But since their relationship began, there had been many secrets between them. Tatiana, who had already started to cry, continued that if she hadn't run into them by chance, she wouldn't have even known about their relationship. So it felt as if His Majesty had stolen her friend. The emperor saw this as a good opportunity for her to become more independent, and he said, kindly but firmly, that they were all adults, and it would be strange to know a friend's every move. The girl hesitated, but then grabbed Aster's sleeve and suggested they have lunch together. First, she needed to establish a connection with the emperor. Karina's presence was very annoying, but this way, the emperor would be able to see the difference between them and realize that the duchess was better than that woman. Tatiana added that family harmony was very important. When the emperor understood this, he would choose her. He wouldn't even notice Karina's sudden disappearance. If both Andrew and Aster became infatuated with her, she wouldn't know which one to choose to be the emperor. A loud laugh from Aster filled the space around them. In this situation, family harmony was an incredibly comical concept to him. Andrew immediately began to apologize, but there was nothing to apologize for. They amused him, so there was nothing to feel guilty about. Tatiana should be more worried about her own family before meddling in her childhood friend's relationship. If the Duke had told his wife more about their past, she wouldn't even be having these thoughts. For example, if he had mentioned what his late father did to the emperor or the second prince who died in that treasonous plot, he could have told her about the day everyone called the Prince's Rebellion. Andrew said he would explain the situation to the Duchess. They finally said their goodbyes. The emperor apologized for keeping the princess waiting. They had only exchanged a few words, but he could already tell that Tatiana was a handful. Aster couldn't figure out why men would fall for her act, but Karina was glad he didn't take her side. Tatiana would surely use her bracelet on the emperor too, but for some reason, he remained as cold as ice towards her. Andrew found it amusing that she had made him believe her, but even with the bracelet, this was all she could show him. She claimed what happened was like a drill, but she started biting her fingers, something she had never done before. A game window popped up in front of Aster, showing that she could not capture this target. The emperor had actually reserved the entire first district of Vera Avenue. He needed to check on a hunting outfit that was being made, but the place was usually crowded, and he thought it might be dangerous. Karina knew that reserving an entire district was no easy feat, especially since he probably had to hide his identity. Of course, it would have been much easier to have the clothes delivered directly to the palace, and she was right. But Aster wanted to go on a date with her, because they might not see each other for a long time after the masquerade ball. He thought that perhaps his attention was tiring her out, since she was already so busy. But Karina was actually happy to have this chance to get away from all the work and stress. Aster was acting strangely, as if he was angry with the princess about something. If only she could get inside his head right now and see what he was thinking. The couple finally arrived at the entrance of a tailor shop. The shop was called Damas's Boutique. The person who greeted them inside was kneeling on the floor, serving his guests enthusiastically. He concluded they were wealthy nobles, smelling the money on them from a mile away. It was time to squeeze these suckers dry and take them for all they were worth. They had already prepared 10 custom outfits for each of them, based on their measurements. So all they had to do was pick the ones they liked. Aster was stunned, because the princess didn't need a hunting outfit. At the ball, she had agreed to accept the game he caught. She hadn't told him she wanted to participate, yet she had already sent her measurements to the tailor. She certainly had a knack for surprising the Emperor. In fact, Karina was planning to run into Allison at the hunt, but she couldn't tell this man. He was trying to talk her out of it, so she had to force a smile and pretend nothing was wrong. This wasn't going to work, so she started sending a distress signal to a shop assistant, giving him a subtle look. Just as Aster was about to get something out of her, the tailor interjected, saying the clothes were ready to be tried on, so they had to cut their conversation short. She needed to come up with an explanation before the Emperor returned. From His Majesty's perspective, she was probably hiding a lot of things. But she wasn't used to asking for help or trusting anyone. She had acted on her own during the fire, though she might have been done for without Andrew's help. Karina hadn't told him about partnering with Raymond to open a perfume boutique. She also kept quiet about her plans for the hospital. His Majesty always offered a helping hand, never asking any questions. To be honest, even her bringing Andrew and Tatiana today had caught him completely off guard. Looking at it this way, she really seemed like a heartless lover. Just then, Aster, having changed, stood before her, wanting to hear her opinion on the suit. Karina praised him sincerely, and the Emperor was pleased that she liked it. Now all that was left was to try on the other 9 suits. The princess wanted to see, of course, but the sun would be down by the time he finished trying them all on. The only solution was to buy all the suits and have someone pick them up. Karina had told Aster that they hadn't been on a date in a long time, and she really wanted to take a walk and talk. Once outside, the girl let out a cheer of pure joy. She had always wanted to do this at least once, to shout out loud in the middle of the city. It had been a long time since they had wandered around so carefree, without worrying about who was watching. And now it was all thanks to the Emperor. But he thought it was because the princess had managed to squeeze out some time from her own crazy schedule. From that moment on, she wanted to be more honest with him. She took Aster's hand and, if he was willing to listen, offered to share a story from her past. It was from when she was a junior at the academy. She and Tatiana had agreed to do their graduation project together, but her friend now said she had already joined another group. If she had said so earlier, Karina could have found another group, because failing the group project meant graduating a year late. Tatiana begged her to understand. Daniel had been in her group since last year, and Raymond said he wouldn't do it without her. But unfortunately, a group couldn't have 4 people. So Daniel offered to leave his group and partner with Karina, but she refused him and decided to work alone. Honestly, this situation was nothing new to her. For the past 3 years at the academy, she had always worked alone. She knew very well that she trusted people too easily, but somehow, even knowing this, she always ended up being played. Later, after Karina and Andrew ran into each other, the professor called them in to discuss the graduation project. A group project was required for graduation, and their names were the only ones not on any group list. They could form a team, and the professor would add them to the list. Andrew immediately agreed to the idea, but Karina insisted on doing the project alone. She didn't care if her grade would be lowered. As long as she could graduate, that was enough. Seeing Andrew, as a new student, hesitate about doing the project alone, the professor gave them a week to sort things out. He added that Karina, it would be much easier to do the project with someone else than alone, and they could avoid having their grades docked. Then he dismissed them until the next class. Andrew asked if the princess would finally agree to do the project together. He had just transferred and hadn't made any friends yet. For Andrew Laverne to transfer so late suggested he had a complicated history. In any case, if he tried to approach a girl, rumors would fly. Karina told him bluntly that she was doing her graduation project alone, so he should find another group. Then she walked away without even giving him a chance to reply. The other female students immediately surrounded him, saying that Karina was notoriously rude and that talking to her would ruin anyone's day. They insisted he team up with them instead of wasting his time on her. From Karina's perspective, though, this was perhaps a good thing. Every time she appeared on campus, she became the center of gossip. Everyone talked about her behind her back, even though they knew nothing about her. They spread rumors about her having an inferiority complex and called her a rude bitch. But if she really had such a bad personality, she wouldn't just take all the insults lying down, right? Of course, the gossip used to bother her, but now she didn't care. It was all just a game set up for the main characters anyway, a fake world. Tears solved nothing, and crying and getting angry were pointless. So, finally alone in the woods, Karina just took a bite of her sandwich. Let her boyfriend leave, let her friends betray her, let them accuse her of things she didn't do. She didn't care one bit. As the girl was munching away, she heard someone approaching. It was Andrew, who looked like he thought he was alone. She told him she was almost done eating and he could stay if he wanted. Noticing she had barely touched her sandwich, the new kid was about to leave, but then suggested they eat together. No one could see them here anyway, so the girl didn't care. The silence as they ate was super awkward, so Karina decided to ask Andrew how his graduation project group was going. Although the princess thought he had already teamed up with Sophie and Ruby, the guy still hadn't found anyone and refused to join those girls. He didn't want anything to do with people who gossiped about someone they didn't even know. This made Karina feel a little uneasy. He also reminded her that they had put stickers under the sandwich wrappers. From that day on, the girls started having lunch with Andrew. They gradually started spending more time together. Even though his family status was far from high, she didn't care at all. In fact, his low social standing meant he wouldn't be a main character, and Karina was perfectly fine with that. It was easy to be with Andrew, even when they were just quiet, but they could also talk about anything. He was the only one who was on her side during her toughest times. Only with him could she be herself, and not just the main character's friend. Autumn came, and there was only one semester left until graduation. But thanks to Andrew, her last year at the academy was filled with good memories. People gossiped about Karina's relationship with him and his status, but she didn't care about the hate or insults directed at her. It wasn't that she wasn't worried at all, she just endured it. But it broke her heart to see Andrew being humiliated because of her. Just as she was losing her temper with some gossipers, a man approached her. He was holding a letter from the Duchy of the Pioneer family. Skimming the letter, Karina was horrified. Trouble had come from where she least expected it. Andrew was happy to see his girl, but his expression changed instantly when he saw she was crying. The letter said her mother was missing. This happened a year and a half after her parents separated. After the divorce, her mother had no fixed residence, constantly moving for her research. During one of her trips, she had vanished without a trace in the mountains. Karina could look back on that time calmly now, knowing she had returned safely. But at the time, it felt like her world was falling apart. She was afraid her mother would never come back, afraid that the people closest to her would disappear one by one, and she would end up all alone. Karina couldn't understand why everyone was leaving her. Maybe she shouldn't have been born at all. Andrew couldn't believe she would say such a thing. Sometimes she would imagine a world where she was the main character, surrounded by real friends and a man who truly loved her. No one looked down on her, and they cherished her for her actions. A world without unexpected tragedies, where she was happy and loved every day. That was the life of a main character, right? Andrew came up from behind her and held her tightly, his own tears falling. He promised to make her world a good one, to always be by her side, to never change, and to love her forever. Andrew's confession sounded so sweet at the time, but Karina's anxiety grew because she didn't know if she could trust him. She wanted him to get along with others, but she also wanted to be with him. She desperately wanted to believe him. She loved him, but she was afraid he would abandon her too. But these thoughts led her nowhere. Whatever, Karina was just a side character and couldn't do anything anyway. It was better not to think about it. One weekday, they ran into Tatiana. She asked if Karina wanted to go to a new cafe with her and Daniel, but Karina had other plans. Tatiana knew her plans were Andrew, so she just said goodbye, figuring there was nothing she could do. The students around them were insulting the man, whom they saw as a gold digger, and couldn't understand why they were together. To Karina, the way Tatiana stared at Andrew was too intense, as if she was once again plotting to snatch him away from her. His character wasn't even in the original story, so everything should be fine. Andrew had nothing to do with the main plot, as long as they didn't cross paths again. When the guys started getting nosy, Karina felt that nothing good would come of it, and you can't just shut everyone up. Rumors are just rumors anyway, and the only thing that matters is that we know the truth. Andrew just wanted them to stop talking, and she retorted that the son of a mere viscount stepping up wouldn't change anything when even a princess was powerless. If it were an easy matter that he could solve just by talking, things would be completely different. He could go on pretending he was the main character, but they were both just side characters in this story. She kept saying hurtful things to him, even though she didn't mean to and didn't even know why she was doing it. If he weren't just the son of some viscount, but the crown prince, maybe things would be different. From that day on, Andrew started spending a lot of time alone. After a while, he confessed that he was actually in love with Tatiana. The man who had promised to never leave her ended up abandoning her, leaving her all alone. It was then that Karina realized that eternal love was complete nonsense. So she basically stopped believing in love altogether. She thought His Majesty asked her out not because he loved her, but for political gain. Still, he had been kind and supportive, so she wanted to repay him. Of course, it would be difficult to tell him everything now, but she had almost succeeded in her revenge plan against Tatiana. Karina took Aster's hand and gave him permission to use her as well, to build a relationship based on honesty and mutual benefit. She proposed to the man with determination. He already had the greatest military and political influence in the empire, but his approval rating among the populace was quite low due to the early terrorist attacks. So basically, the guy needed the support of the nobility. To solve this, he could use Karina's family status to influence high society. So, Karina was ready to accept the proposal he had made when they first met. But the emperor's face was not beaming with joy. He was clearly frustrated and let go of her hand. Aster didn't understand if she really thought that was the day they first met. The remark was a complete mystery to Karina, but he wasn't about to explain. I mean, getting a marriage proposal on the first day was indeed crazy, and Karina was truly confused by his words. Yes, it was a total accident, especially since she was dead drunk and acting like a fool that day. But he still helped her. She must have been too drunk to be in her right mind. Aster said honestly that he thought the princess was a very fine, intelligent, and interesting woman. Even so, he rejected her proposal. Karina was completely confused as to why he would do that, since it was his idea in the first place. Aster explained that they barely knew each other and shouldn't rush things, but they could decide later. The conversation ended there, and the girl didn't know what else to say. She mulled over their conversation on the carriage ride to the royal hunting grounds with the emperor. Her social standing hadn't changed since he proposed. Now Karina wasn't even sure if his initial idea was just for politics. Maybe the recent encounter with Tatiana had affected Aster after all, and he was no different from other men. In the end, it was the man himself who broke the silence. He handed the princess a gift box, hoping she would wear it at the hunting festival. Inside was an incredibly beautiful butterfly brooch. Karina was so embarrassed, she couldn't even look Aster in the eye. But since he gave her a gift, maybe things were okay. The girl still couldn't figure out what he was thinking. With these complicated feelings, the day of the hunting festival finally arrived. Lily was very excited. They said the royal forest was incredibly beautiful, but Karina had been there once a long time ago. It was nearly impossible to get in there, except during the hunting festival. But thanks to the princess, the handmaiden could finally see the forest with her own eyes. So, even though Karina didn't want to become like Taya, she put on the bracelet, wanting to see the male lead's future. The girl decided she would take it off as soon as she figured out Aster's feelings. Lily asked her master if something was bothering her, as she had been acting strange ever since she returned from her date with His Majesty. Karina pretended that everything was fine. Their boutique was opening soon, the weather was great, and the hunting festival was just around the corner, so things couldn't be better. She told her handmaiden not to worry about her. Even though the princess didn't know why Aster had rejected her that day, she had other important matters to attend to. The girls finally arrived at the meeting point, right at the entrance to the royal forest. His Majesty was about to begin the opening ceremony, and everyone had to be present. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, the emperor came out and announced the start of the hunt. Karina froze when she saw the accessory he was wearing. Aster was wearing the very brooch she had given him. The moment their eyes met, the girl understood the meaning of the brooch. Lily had said it was a signal, a symbol of their love and growing relationship. This was basically an announcement to everyone that they were together. The emperor was truly happy to be in this legendary place with everyone. This land, known as the Golden Forest, was where the creator god was born, according to legend. The forest is a special area where magic is nullified, as the pure magic stones here will absorb all your mana. So everyone can show their true skills, which is the whole point of the royal hunt. After tonight's opening ceremony, the competition would officially begin. The first day was for the men's competition, and the second day was for the women's. The third day was for the banquet. The emperor hoped everything would go smoothly and wished everyone good luck. While Lily took their luggage to their tent, Karina decided to check out the medical tent. She had an important task to accomplish at this festival, which was to meet Tatiana's doctor, Allison, and get her on her side. The Grand Duke's crest was on a nearby flag. Such an important family would certainly not miss the royal hunt. After Andrew and Tatiana's marriage, their family's retainers participated in every official event of the empire, as if trying to keep the emperor's growing power in check. So it wasn't hard to guess that they would also bring medical staff to the hunting festival. To find the infirmary, Karina pretended to feel unwell and asked for help from a female doctor. But the only female doctor here was the Grand Duchess's personal physician, Lady Allison, so an assistant gave her a painkiller. Although she had hoped to speak with the doctor, it was impossible to talk to her now unless it was an emergency. However, a male doctor could examine her. Just as Karina thought, it would be difficult to meet Allison. At least she knew the woman was definitely here. The problem now was how to meet her without seeming suspicious. She figured she would have to fake an injury in front of everyone during the competition. A short while later, Raymond also appeared at the festival. Thanks to Karina, he looked a little exhausted. Because she had demanded that the product development be completed before the royal hunt, he hadn't had a moment's rest. Judging by the energetic way he was waving his hands, there was no need to worry about his health. Anyway, she had already inspected all the developed products yesterday, and now he just needed to keep one last promise: to present Karina with some prey during the royal hunt. Raymond certainly remembered, and as soon as the hunt was over, this ridiculous contract would also expire. Although Karina wasn't sure if he could catch anything with his mediocre skills, the guy had to at least try. Seeing him so eager for the agreement to end, Raymond finally exploded, shouting that he really hated her. In the medical tent, Allison asked Tatiana if she was sure she wanted to participate in the competition, considering she had been complaining of headaches recently. The Grand Duke had been looking forward to this event for a long time, so she didn't want to worry him over a headache. Allison told the Grand Duchess to notify her immediately if she felt unwell and that she would be on standby. As soon as Tatia stepped out of the tent, Wilhelm was there asking how she felt. He had rushed over as soon as he finished his official duties and was worried when he heard she had missed the opening ceremony and was staying here. She wasn't happy to see him and really wished he had come with Andrew. The Grand Duke said he still had things to take care of, so he would come over later. He said Wilhelm was too excited about the royal hunt, like a child whose parents promised to take him on a picnic, as if he wanted to give up his position as the knight commander to become a toy soldier commander. Just then, he noticed something was off with Tatia. Nearby, she saw Raymond standing next to Karina, who clearly hadn't expected to see his beloved here. She grabbed his arm, saying they needed to talk. The two went into the Grand Duke's tent. Meanwhile, Wilhelm, annoyed that this newcomer had captured Tatia's attention, tried to figure out what they were doing inside. She wasn't sure if she could use the ring Raymond had given her, since they said magic was ineffective in the Golden Forest. Yes, the Golden Forest absorbs your mana, but it can't block the power of an artifact made from a magic stone. So if you use this ring to get rid of Karina, it will be a perfect crime. Hearing Tatiana say this, Raymond asked her to give the ring back to him. He told her he would do it himself, as it was too dangerous for a girl to do something like this alone. Tatia couldn't believe it. Did Ray really think she was that stupid? He promised to help, then disappeared without telling her his plan, and now he wanted the ring he gave her back. Raymond emotionally said that everything he did was for her, and that he had only approached Karina in the first place to get closer to her. Seeing his affection level change so easily, Tatiana realized the problem was with his feelings. The moment they were apart, his affection rapidly faded. She clutched the bracelet and cried, saying it might end up abandoning her too. Raymond swore that he had always been sincere with her and that he would do anything for her happiness. His affection level immediately began to rise. So Tatiana asked for his help because the only way she could achieve happiness was for Karina to disappear. The man took her hand. Ever since he first saw Tatia cry, she had been the only one for him. But he couldn't let that happen, so he begged for her forgiveness. He snatched the ring. The men were gathering at the starting point of the hunt, right at the entrance to the Golden Forest. Karina searched through the crowd, but couldn't find Aster, as she wanted to talk to him. Yesterday, she was suddenly surrounded by a crowd and didn't get a chance to talk to him properly. In the past, people always avoided her at events. so maybe the power of the original story was weakening. Finally, their eyes met, and Aster asked the princess why she was here so early. She hadn't been able to greet him properly yesterday, so she decided to come see him before the men's competition began. Of course, it couldn't compare to the brooch he gave her, but she magically grew a flower for Aster and cast a preservation spell on it so it wouldn't wilt. She worried the gift wasn't good enough, as she didn't have much mana or skill. But it was more than enough to make the emperor ecstatic. Karina had done it. The flower was flawless. She blushed, noticing that the man was wearing their couple brooch. Today, Aster had forgotten to mention again that when they both wore the brooches, he would know instantly if anything happened to her. So if she was in danger, he would appear. Therefore, Karina could enjoy the festival without any worries. Last night, Raymond snatched the ring from Tatiana's hand and threw it as far as he could. The woman, not wanting to give up what was hers, immediately ran after the ring and almost caught it. Just then, she fell at the feet of her husband, Andrew Lowerman Gloucester. He didn't know what to make of his wife, chasing a ring given by another man like a dog. Tatiana made an excuse that she was just being greedy and that Raymond had given her the ring and then taken it back, so she was angry. Then Andrew said he would buy her hundreds of rings with bigger diamonds to replace that little trinket, and stepped on it, crushing it to pieces. The girl screamed at him to stop, shielding the thing with her hands. This was nothing new to the Grand Duke, so he couldn't even get angry, just surprised that his wife valued a ring from another man so much. She was truly capable of hurting feelings he never had for her in the first place. If she planned to act so basely in the future, it would be better for them to divorce. Unable to bear the pressure, Tatiana confessed that it was an artifact. It wasn't just an ordinary ring, but an extremely precious item with a magic stone. It allowed you to use mind control magic even in the Golden Forest. Tatiana eventually had to admit that she planned to use the ring to get rid of Karina. After learning about the jewelry's magical properties, Andrew confiscated it from his wife. He put it on without hesitation before the hunt began. Perhaps his wish would come true sooner than he thought. The royal hunt began, and the men charged forward, ready to prove themselves. Andrew was the first to kill a prey, with his majesty only a step behind. A moment later, a bullet grazed the Grand Duke's ear. He hesitated this time, and the emperor snatched the prey. The sky grew dark. After hunting a large number of different animals, they returned together. The men stopped at the edge of a cliff, and Aster noticed he felt a bit strange today. He couldn't tell if it was a new feeling or a familiar one, but the moment their eyes met, Andrew's face was twisted, looking like fear. But today, he looked at the emperor with the same eyes as the late second prince, coveting his position. Aster aimed his rifle at the Grand Duke's head, but the man didn't even flinch and activated the ring. Andrew declared that this position never belonged to his brother in the first place. If our father hadn't been killed back then, he would never have gotten the throne. The emperor wasn't sure if he understood the weight of his words. The Grand Duke quickly corrected himself. If it weren't for Aster killing our father, I would be the one on the throne, and my brother would be groveling at my feet. The man immediately fell to his knees, his rifle clattering to the ground. He couldn't control his body, as if it were made of stone or didn't belong to him at all. Everything was spinning, and the emperor realized Andrew was using a mind control artifact. And the Grand Duke was ecstatic because he was finally showing his true colors, the face of a murderer. It wasn't enough that our mother died when he was born. He also took the lives of our father and brothers. The title of Bloody Emperor is too glamorous. Andrew only saw him as a murderer stained with blood since birth. So the throne and Karina, they should have been his from the very beginning. Taking advantage of his position, the man pushed his brother off the cliff, trying to take back what he believed was his. He crushed the flower Karina had given him, then bid Aster farewell, sending him straight to hell.